Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. Today we are going to talk about platform single sign-on in macOS, and we are going to see how it can be implemented with Microsoft Intune. So very quickly, let's take a look over today's agenda. First, we are going to take a trip down the memory lane and we are going to talk about the history of authentication in macOS. How did things happen, let's say back in early 2000s? How has it evolved? And what is the latest and greatest and the most advanced way of doing authentication in a macOS device and how it can be managed via MDM. Then we are going to talk about platform single sign-on extension, what it is, why is it there, what is the purpose that it is serving and stuff like that. We are going to understand its advantages. We are going to talk about what are the various flavors inside of platform single sign-on extension for macOS that we have. We are going to talk about working of PSSO. We are going to see how we can deploy it from an MDM, in this case Intune. We are going to talk about all the logs that we must check in a device which has been targeted via PSSO policy. We are going to see how the flow is going to look like for an end user whose device has been targeted via a PSSO policy by the admin. We are going to talk about some enhancements that has happened as far as PSSO deployment is concerned from Intune. Some recent enhancements has been made. Then we are going to talk about how we can further enhance the PSSO experience in a macOS device by deploying scripts. And then we'll talk about what are the future areas of improvements, what are some other good to have features for Microsoft or for Apple to consider in future. And then at the end, we are going to do a demo where we are going to enroll a device and then see the entire behavior. All right, so it's going to be one of the shorter ones, but a jam-packed session. So the first thing that I want to talk about is I want to give you a brief of how the authentication mechanism and how the authentication options in a macOS device, in a corporate macOS device, has evolved over the years. Now, I know that this session is about platform SSO, but it is important that we have a basic understanding of what LDAP binding is, and then how we progressed towards Kerberos SSO, then how we progressed from there towards enterprise SSO, and then how did we move to platform SSO, what is a SHIM, how does a SHIM fit into the picture, and stuff like that, right? So these are important for us to, before we can get over here, it is important for us to understand this block so that we have the needed context. Yes. So I'm going to double click now on each of these so that we understand this context. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something called LDAP binding. And as you can see over here, the identity management ecosystem in macOS is a little complicated because, like in other operating system, in macOS also it has evolved over the years. So let's double click on LDAP binding first, and then we will discuss all of these one by one. So if you're coming from a Windows background, think of LDAP binding as equivalent to joining a macOS device. Just like we could join a Windows device to the on-premise domain, the LDAP binding is it's the equivalent of that. So in this, what we are doing is we are joining a macOS device to the on-premise domain. This methodology has existed since many years. I believe back in mid of 2000s is when we used to do LDAP binding, and it worked very well back then because back then there was no COVID. All the users were on-premise, all the users were coming to the office, and as long as your macOS device has undergone LDAP binding and you are at the office location connected to the corporate network with direct line of sight of the domain controller, everything pretty much works fine. However, if you have issues, if you have a scenario wherein users are hybrid, you have some users working from home, you have some users working remotely, then in that case, LDAP binding does not provide the best experience, especially when you don't have direct line of sight with the domain controller. So let's say in an instant, let's say that there is a user whose password is changed in the on-premise Active Directory, but the user does not have direct line of sight with the on-premise domain controller. Let's say he's working from home. In that case, you would experience a lot of issues. So just know about LDAP binding is this is the legacy way. If only over the years I could spell things better using my mouse. But anyways, let's call this the legacy methodology, and this is equivalent to joining a Mac to the on-premise domain, just like we do in Windows. Now LDAP existed. We have understood what were the limitations with LDAP binding. That is, no line of sight with the domain controller. You are working from home, not the ideal experience. Now, after LDAP, then came something called Kerberos SSO extension. Now, this Kerberos SSO extension was designed to build upon the machines that had undergone the LDAP binding. So what we did was we took a lot of the capability that we got from domain join, and in a way we modernized it so that then it can be deployed via MDM. So what this would do is this Kerberos SSO extension functionality, this would enable the device to seamlessly talk to a IDP and then get Kerberos tickets. And that Kerberos tickets later on would be used for authenticating to on-premise resources like, let's say, file shares, or let's say network printers, or let's say some other network hosted locations that you might have. But fundamentally, this Kerberos extension was also used for devices, for macOS devices which were on-prem joined, meaning for macOS devices which had undergone the LDAP binding. So until now, we have understood over here from this picture, we have understood what LDAP binding was. We have understood what Kerberos SSO extension was and how Kerberos SSO extension complemented the devices that had undergone LDAP binding by making sure that those devices got a Kerberos ticket. And we already know about what Kerberos ticket is and how it functions in an on-premise environment, right? So in using Kerberos SSO extension, the device would get a Kerberos ticket, and then the device would utilize that Kerberos ticket to access the on-premise hosted applications, so that all that access was seamless. Now, the next was something called Enterprise SSO, which is a feature developed by Apple. So Apple released something called Enterprise Single Sign-On, and then Microsoft built on top of it and released something called Enterprise Single Sign-On plugin extension. So this plugin extension was the extension that was developed or built by Microsoft on top of the Enterprise SSO that was developed by Apple. Now the goal here was, as the name suggests, what is the name? The name is Enterprise SSO plugin extension. So the goal was using this extension to facilitate single sign-on in the devices. So let us say that you have a macOS device, and in that macOS device you have logged in. Now you as an admin want that the end user should have the best and most seamless behavior. And what is the most seamless behavior? The most seamless behavior is there should not be a lot of login prompts for the end user. Like when the end user is going to a URL or going through an application, launching any application, he should not have to enter his username and password several times because he has already logged into the machine, right? So what this Enterprise SSO extension helps you achieve is, it helps you achieve SSO, that is single sign-on, to maybe some websites, maybe some applications, which we are going to see later, by utilizing the extension that is already present. Now the extension basically, what the extension is actually doing is, this SSO extension is basically allowing us to provide a primary refresh token on these macOS devices. And using this primary refresh token or a PRT, we are authenticating to all the other resources onto which we want SSO. Okay, so once the user is signed into the device, we can broker all the future authentication using a module that is built into the SSO extension application, which in this case is Company Portal app, so that the user has the best experience and he doesn't have to enter his username and password every time. Okay, before I move forward, let's again take a step back, and now I want to spend some time explaining about these building blocks, because again, they are not maybe directly related to Platform SSO, but these are the building blocks, and in my opinion, very good interview questions. Like if I am going to ask anyone about Platform Single Sign-On and its implementation, before I talk about Platform Single Sign-On, I would ask what is the difference between Platform Single Sign-On and Enterprise Single Sign-On plugin extension, and which one is for what, and which one is meeting what purpose. And we will be able to answer those questions only if we have understood what each of these building blocks are. So again, just taking a step back, LDAP binding equivalent to joining a macOS device to the on-premise domain. Then came Kerberos extension. This was providing Kerberos tickets, and using those tickets, the macOS device which was on-premise joined, it could access file share or network share. Then we had something called Enterprise Single Sign-On plugin. Now, Enterprise Single Sign-On is something that is a feature that was developed by macOS, that was developed by Apple, and then there is a plugin or extension that Microsoft built for it. And what is this Enterprise Single Sign-On plugin or extension doing? It's doing exactly what it says. It is facilitating single sign-on in that macOS device, so that if a user is logged into the device once, if he has to access any subsequent application or subsequent website or URL which requires the same username and password, the user does not have to key that in every time. So seamless single sign-on is something that Enterprise SSO plugin extension was providing. Now, what was it not providing? There are some things that the Enterprise Single Sign-On was still not providing, and there was still a gap. What was that gap? The gap was this was still not doing anything related to the local account and password management in the device. What I mean by that is, let us say that you have a macOS device in front of you. When you log into a macOS device, you log in using, let's say, a local credential. You log in using a local user. Once you have logged into the local user, then let's say that you want to access any corporate resource. Then you have to enter your corporate credentials while accessing those corporate resources. Now, once you have provided your corporate credentials, then the expectation is that the single sign-on will work, and you won't have to, when you're accessing the second corporate resource or the third corporate resource, you won't have to enter the corporate identity subsequent times. But still, there are two passwords or two accounts that are needed, right? So let's say that this is a Mac device. We are logging into the Mac device using a local account, right? So the user needs to remember his local account username and the local account password. Now, once he has logged into the device, now he wants to access, let's say, some corporate resource. So while accessing that corporate resource, he again has to now enter his corporate username, and now he has to corporate username and then corporate username's password. So he has to remember this and he has to remember this, right? And when he is accessing the next corporate resource and the next corporate resource, then the expectation is that single sign-on should work over here. And since we have already provided the corporate username, entered the corporate username and password once, that should flow down over here. But still, there are two usernames, the local username and the local username's password, which is used to log into the macOS device. And then there is the corporate username, which is your email ID or something like that, and the password of that. So the user still has to remember these two, and Enterprise Single Sign-On is not fixing that issue. That is, it is not providing any solution. If the user is saying that, oh, you know what, I need to remember this username and this password and this username and this password and manage both of them, like make sure that they are compliant and change them when needed and key them into the device twice. Okay. So this is what Enterprise Single Sign-On plugin extension was, and this is what it did not do. Okay. So we have understood what Enterprise Single Sign-On did and what it did not do. Now, in this slide, we are again reiterating what were the gaps if you had a device which was on-premise domain joined, or in which you had LDAP, in which you had the Kerberos extension also, and in which you had the Enterprise SSO extension also. Let us say that you had all those things coming down or flowing down to a device. Still, there were some gaps that were needed to be addressed. Now, what were those gaps? So as you can see over here, it says that nothing that we have outlined so far. When I say we have outlined so far, I mean this and this and this. That is LDAP binding or Kerberos SSO extension or Enterprise SSO extension. So none of those represent a great way to manage macOS local identities, credentials, or provide SSO everywhere, right? Because none of them are doing anything related to local account management in the device. All they are doing is either they're providing you a Kerberos ticket or they are providing you SSO extension so that once the corporate username and password has been entered, it doesn't have to be entered the second time or the third time. But what if the user no longer wants the device to be joined to the on-premise domain? Let's say that he never visits the office. Let's say he's always working from home. However, now the mindset of the people has changed. Now the customers want to log into their macOS device using their cloud identity provider. That is, they don't want your on-premise domain controller to be the identity provider. They want the identity provider to be Entra ID or Okta ID or ping or federated via ADFS, right? They want all these modern ways of logging into the device. And they don't want to join the device to the on-premise domain. That is, they don't want to do LDAP binding. And if they don't want to do LDAP binding and want to authenticate via a fancy IDP, then we don't have a solution for that. So macOS login, the LDAP binding or the Kerberos extension, these were all originally designed for local accounts and for on-premise Active Directory setup. They don't work very well with modern IDPs like Entra, Okta, Ping. Because these modern IDPs, they don't work on Kerberos ticket. They work on something called OAuth and tokens and claims and browser-based authentications. And macOS natively cannot speak these protocols or speak these languages. So again, let me just explain this in a easier way. Until now, the methodologies that we discussed, like Kerberos authentication or LDAP binding or Enterprise SSO, all these were not designed for a macOS device to talk with the modern IDPs like Entra ID or Okta or Ping. All these were designed and tailored for on-premise based authentication. Now, since more and more customers don't want to do on-premise authentication and they want to move to cloud IDP, more and more customers don't want to on-premise domain join device and they want to do equivalent of what is a cloud join. The solution that we have until now, those solutions don't meet the purpose. And over here you can see the third point is, these were not phishing resistant options. Like, let's say that you are joining your device to the on-premise domain. In that case, also you are entering the username and password manually, right? Now that is not phishing resistant. Phishing resistant would mean a methodology of entering the password without actually keying in the password, right? Like Windows Hello for Business, a common example if you're coming from a Windows background, or using a UB key, or something like that, right? So what we have discussed until now, they were not phishing resistant. That is another issue. What we have discussed until now, that did not really help if the user did not want to join the device to the on-premise domain, or if they wanted to authenticate to other IDPs like Entra, Okta, or Ping, and there was no way of managing the local credentials locally. I mean, we were not managing the credentials. We were just providing a SSO experience, which means that, like we saw in the previous diagram, since we were not managing this username and password and this username and password, the user has to now remember 2 usernames and 2 passwords and then maintain them and make sure that they're compliant, right? And then there were multiple tools that were used. How were there multiple tools? Well, the first tool was doing LDAP binding. The second tool was the Kerberos SSO extension. The third tool was the Enterprise SSO extension, right? So there are 3 tools here itself, right? So all these 3 had to be maintained, deployed, and even if you deployed and maintained all these 3 things, still this 1, 2, and 3, these three were still problem. Okay. So this was all until, let's say, early 2010 to early 2015. Then came the concept of a SHIM. Now let's understand what is a SHIM, and then we will. Then the next hop is Platform SSO. So now SHIM is nothing but a lightweight authentication layer that integrates cloud identity provider into the macOS login process. So before you get into definition and before it complicates things more, over here I said that macOS devices are not intelligent enough. I mean, macOS devices are only intelligent enough by default to understand Kerberos tokens, but they are not intelligent enough to speak the same language which is what these IDPs are speaking, right? Therefore, to bridge that gap, we had something called a SHIM. So think of SHIM like a translator, right? macOS is speaking French. The customer is speaking, let's say, English. Then you bring in a translator. The translator is doing the translation from English to French and French to English and vice versa, right? Again, stupid example, but think of SHIM like similar to that. So now when you have that context, now if you read this, SHIM is a lightweight authentication layer that integrates with the cloud identity provider that integrates the cloud identity provider into the macOS login process by translating the modern web-based authentication, which is what the IDPs are using these days, that is OAuth and all the other protocols, token schemes, into something that macOS can accept. This is used to make the end user's login experience a little better. Now, the best example of SHIM is something called Jamf Connect or Enclave. Now, just like Intune is a MDM, there is another MDM called Jamf. Now, Jamf can be used for managing the device. And Jamf has a product called Jamf Connect, which is a SHIM. And what that SHIM is doing is, it is acting as that middle layer so that your macOS devices can talk with your IDP. Your IDP can talk with your macOS devices, and both can understand each other, because by default, they both cannot. Okay. And this is what exactly a SHIM is. A SHIM is using the experience better. Example of third-party SHIM is this. Now, SHIM is not replacing macOS login. It is just augmenting it. It is just making it better. It is just making sure that both the parties are understanding each other's language. Okay. So now, does this mean that we have a SHIM so all the issues are resolved? No, that is not the case. We had a SHIM. I think Jamf Connect was released maybe in 2017, 2018. I don't remember. But Jamf Connect and this SHIM came into the picture. It solved a lot of issues. It solved the issue wherein we said that macOS device is not able to communicate with your cloud IDP provider. Well, that issue is resolved. If you have a macOS device and you want to use cloud identity provider, you can still use that. The user login experience is a little better now. But are all the issues resolved? No, there is still a gap with SHIM. What is the gap with SHIM? Well, there are 2 basic disadvantages. First is there is still no native way of managing the local identity in the macOS device. What I mean by that is we still have not addressed this issue wherein the end user has to maintain this local accounts username and password, and his corporate identity's username and password. So this issue still exists. That is, there is still no native way of managing local identity in the macOS device to make the authentication experience seamless. What I mean by that is that this user still needs to remember two usernames and two combinations of username and password, right? Which again is not ideal. User might forget it, too many help desk tickets that are being raised, stuff like that, right? And the second thing is, still there is a reliance on third-party product, right? Like this SHIM is a third-party product. This SHIM like Jamf Connect or Xcred, these are not first-party. These are not like built by Apple into the operating system. You need to purchase them, right? There would obviously be a licensing cost for it. So if you're using a MDM, on top of the MDM, you need to have this. So there is still a third-party reliance. And then there are so many tools over there which can interact with each other and interfere with each other, right? Like let's say that even if you're using a SHIM, you might still use the LDAP binding. You might still have Kerberos SSO extension for accessing on-premise file resources. You might still have Enterprise SSO extension on top, and then you might have a SHIM, right? So again, some gaps are met, but still a lot of things that are still not addressed. Now that we have understood all this, now that we have understood LDAP binding, Kerberos SSO, Enterprise SSO, and a SHIM, now I think Platform SSO will make sense. So now let's dive into what Platform Single Sign-On for macOS is, and why is this needed, and what gap is it filling. So Platform Single Sign-On is not invented by Microsoft. It's a framework developed by Apple. So Apple developed something called Platform Single Sign-On, and then Microsoft built an extension for it. So Platform Single Sign-On was a framework. Microsoft took the concept of single sign-on, which we saw earlier, and then expanded its capabilities to include some management over local accounts. So when we were doing until single sign-on extension was there, and until the SHIM was there, we were not managing the local accounts, right? Like over here, you see that there was no native way of managing local identity. This is the number one issue that we wanted to solve. So over here, you can see Platform Single Sign-On extension is addressing that issue as the number one point over here. That is, it included some capability to have management over the local accounts that were present in the device. That is number one. Number two is, it's a modern way. So since Platform Single Sign-On is a framework by Apple, Apple will keep on working to make this framework better. And as Apple releases new Platform SSO features, Microsoft will also adopt them by making the necessary changes in the extension that they have created for PSSO. Okay. Now, implementing Platform Single Sign-On extension is equivalent for doing an intra-ID join for a Windows device. Just like in case of Windows, you can do an intra-ID registration of your device and then enroll it to Intune, or you can do an intra-ID join of the device, right? So if you're implementing a Platform Single Sign-On extension in a device, and no matter which methodology or which flavor inside of it you are choosing, this is equivalent to doing an intra-ID join of the device. So as I said, now Microsoft could have also built something like a SHIM. Now Microsoft did not build a SHIM. What Microsoft built was, first it waited for Apple to build this framework called Platform SSO, and then Microsoft built this extension on top of that Platform Single Sign-On capability. Okay, so Microsoft did not want to build a goofy SHIM layer like Jamf Connect. It decided to plug into the modernization way of managing everything. Okay, so think of Platform Single Sign-On as a replacement for binding a device to the on-premise service. If you're implementing Platform Single Sign-On, you no longer have to bind your device to the on-premise local domain, and you are getting some manageability over the local accounts as well. That is number 2. And number 3 is you are obviously getting the single sign-on experience. So these are the 3 things that are coming out. First, you do not need to do on-premise domain join. Second, first, you do not need to do on-premise domain join, meaning you do not need to have direct line of connectivity with your on-premise domain controller. And then you have, when you are implementing platform single sign-on extension, you're no longer building a shim or a goofy layer like that. You have total SSO experience in the device, and you are managing the local account and its password as well, to an extent which we will see later on in this session. Now, this is built on macOS 13 or higher. That is something, well, obviously by now the assumption is that all the devices would be running with macOS 13 or later versions. But if not, then that is something we need to keep in mind. And this is facilitating the cloud IDP. So we no longer, so earlier we were relying on a shim to do that translation, like the analogy that I provided, right? Like you are speaking English, your customer is speaking French, you have a translator, that translator is a shim who is doing the translation. Now you no longer need a translator because you can also speak English and French. The customer can also speak English and French, right? So you no longer need that person who is going to work as a translator, okay? Which what I'm trying to get at is, now with platform single sign-on, since this is equivalent to Entra ID joining a device, the device is with this extension is going to understand and talk the cloud IDP language. Like it's going to understand what is a token, it's going to understand what is OAuth, it is going to understand what is a claim and stuff like that. Okay. Now that we have understood what platform single sign-on extension is, we need to understand what platform single sign-on extension is not. Okay. Now I'll explain what platform single sign-on extension is not, but maybe I skipped this point. So when you are implementing platform single sign-on extension, you have got 3 flavors inside of it. I'm going to just let you guys know that there are 3 flavors. We will talk about these flavors later on, but for now, just know that there are 3 flavors. These 3 flavors are nothing but authentication methods that are supported by platform single sign-on.
All right, so let's quickly understand now how is password single sign-on different from passwordless authentication and from MFA. So for that, let's refer to this comparison. What platform single sign-on is, it's a framework as we have discussed until now, and by Apple, and then Microsoft built on it. Microsoft made an extension. It's a framework or a feature. However, passwordless authentication is an authentication method. Passwordless authentication can be anywhere, right? Like let's say that you have a mobile device, iOS phone. When you're unlocking your phone, you can enter your password, or you can just unlock it via your Face ID or via Touch ID, right? So if you're entering your password, it is password based authentication. If you're unlocking it via your Face ID or your Touch ID, that is a passwordless authentication method. Versus platform single sign-on extension is an extension by Microsoft built on top of SSO framework, which was developed by Apple. The purpose of platform single sign-on is to reduce the repeated login across applications. Like the advantage of using PSSO is, once if we have deployed the PSSO profile to a macOS device, once you have authenticated, once you're inside the device, now when you're opening subsequent applications, or you're opening a browser, and from that browser you're opening any application, over there you don't have to authenticate yourself several times. So it's reducing repeated logins across applications. What passwordless authentication is doing is, like when we are authenticating and unlocking our iOS phone, we are not entering our password to begin with. We are unlocking using our Face ID. So it removes password to begin with entirely, right? The scope of PSSO is device applications and browser experience, and the passwordless authentication scope is identifying and doing the identity verification, right? PSSO might or might not require password. Now, it can be password or passwordless. We are going to double click on this in the next slide, where I'm going to explain that when we are setting up PSSO, there are different flavors of PSSO. There is a password based flavor and there is a passwordless flavor known as secure enclave, which we'll talk about. And in case of passwordless authentication, obviously there is not going to be any password. And then dependencies, passwordless authentication can be biometrics like we saw. It can be Face ID, fingerprint, something like that. Whereas password single sign-on, it can use either. So passwordless authentication, this shows how you're authenticating to the device, how you're unlocking your phone, how you're unlocking your Windows device or a macOS device. And PSSO is a framework. It's determining what is the experience after the device has been unlocked, whether you are getting single sign-on experience across browsers and applications within the device or not. Okay, so before I move forward, it is important for us to maybe in some way memorize the definition of PSSO, maybe from an interview perspective, because over there you're not going to explain in, let's say, 20 lines, right? So it helps if you have the definition handy. So if I have to explain PSSO, then platform single sign-on is a framework like we discussed earlier, which is built into macOS, and it was released and it came into effect with the release of macOS Ventura, and it is intended as an extension of the SSO extension that was already present. We have already discussed until this. Now what it does is it adds the optional functionality of syncing a local macOS user's account password with the cloud identity provider's password. What does this mean? Well, this sentence will make more sense in the next slide, where we will go through the two flavors of PSSO. So think of it like this way. PSSO has two flavors. One is password and the second is secure enclave. There is another flavor, that is smart card. I will not go into smart card in detail because it's not that widely used. So think of it like this way. PSSO has two flavors. One is password and one is secure enclave. Now this sentence is talking about option number 1. This is option number 1, which is this. So when you're using this password option of PSSO, what it does is it syncs the local Mac user account's password with a cloud identity provider password. Again, don't go into very details of this. I am going to decode what this sentence means very shortly, but let's just take it at the face value for now. And then the version 2 of this specification introduced 2 additional authentication methods. It's talking about this and this. That allows for paired smart cards for passwordless authentication and a secure enclave backed key that has no effect on the local password but offers a non-phishable authentication factor for accessing cloud resources. Now I know too much of English, too much of jargon, but I hope that by this definition we have understood that PSSO is a framework built into the operating system, came with macOS Ventura. It's built on SSO, which was previously introduced, and it has got these 3 flavors. One is password, second is secure enclave, and third is smart cards. And something unique is happening in each of them. Now once we have double clicked on all these 3 one by one, then we will look at this slide again, and then this definition will make more sense. Okay, now let's double click on these 3 things that we spoke in the previous screen. That is, we spoke about password, we spoke about secure enclave, and we spoke about smart cards. So PSSO has these 3 flavors or these 3 methodologies. Okay, there is something called password, something called secure enclave, something called smart card. They are helping you achieve the same thing at the end. That is, they are helping you get single sign-on across applications, but the prerequisite of each of this is different, and the way they work is also different. The experience is also a little different. So let's double click on each of them now. So we are going to take a look over the working of the first option, that is password sync now. So think of this password, the experience of password sync as equivalent to a device which is Entra ID joined, but which does not have Windows Hello for Business implemented in it, if you are coming from a Windows world. So let's say that you have a Windows device, the device is Entra ID joined. Now if Windows Hello for Business is not there in the device, then what we'll do? We'll log into the device. You can log into the device using a local user and password, or you can log into the device using your Entra ID credentials, right? But you will have to enter the username and password. Since there is no Windows Hello for Business, you cannot authenticate or you cannot log in by using your Face ID or using a fingerprint, right? So the same thing happens when you have PSSO deployed with this password sync flavor. Okay, so that's what the first point is saying. This is equivalent to doing an Entra ID join of a Windows device without the Windows Hello for Business experience. Now, when you implement this, we get a complete SSO experience across applications after signing into the device. So once you are signed in, once you enter a username and password, PSSO registration of the device is already done. Now, when you open subsequent applications in browser or otherwise, you get SSO experience. The internal hardware of the device is nowhere utilized for handling the authentication. Now, why is the internal hardware not utilized? Because you're just entering the username and password, right? Now, when we are looking at the second flavor over there, you will see that an internal component or an internal hardware of that macOS device is utilized. So since it is not utilized over here, therefore I am calling it out. This methodology is not phishing resistant. Why is this not phishing resistant? Because the password that you are entering, the username and password that you are entering, that is prone to leakage, right? If I'm keying in the username and password, there is somebody standing right next to me, that person can see the username and password, it can be leaked, it can be used in a negative way, right? Therefore, it says that this methodology is not phishing resistant. And it is not, but it is intending what we want it to do, right? That is, it is synchronizing the local account's password to cloud IDP. Now, what do I mean by this? This is going to make more sense in the next slide, but I hope that the first 4 points have made sense. Password sync, a flavor of platform single sign-on deployment that we have in macOS. The experience that we get is equivalent to a device without Windows Hello for Business in the Windows world, and what it is letting you do is it is providing you a SSO experience. Now, how does it work at the background? So at the background, what happens is, first is the user has to do a registration, a PSSO registration of the device. The user does the PSSO registration of the device. When he does that, he has to enter his Entra ID credentials. Now, once he enters his credentials, the credentials that he entered, they are hashed and they are sent to Entra ID for validation. Entra ID validates, makes sure that the password that the end user entered is correct. Once it is verified, the password is validated, it is sent to the device. Now the password, now this is very important, and this is a distinguishing factor between password sync and secure enclave. So we need to make sure that we have understood this very correctly. So in step 4, it is saying that password set locally on the device. What does this mean? Let us say that this is my macOS device. I am logging into this macOS device using a username called ABC, and the password of, and this is a local account, and the password of this local account is 123. Okay, so this is a macOS device. I logged into this device using the user account ABC. I entered the password 123. Once I entered the password, then I have to do a PSSO registration of this device. So how do I do this PSSO registration? Well, we'll see all those visuals later. but just know that if a device needs to use PSSO, the device needs to be registered for platform single sign-on. So once you are doing the platform single sign-on registration, over there you have to enter your UPN or your Entra ID credentials, okay, which are and where is this UPN present? This UPN is present in Entra. So let us say that, and again apologies for my bad handwriting here, let us say that my UPN is pm@everythingabountintune.com or pm@ei.com, and the password is ms@123. This is the username and password of my UPN, okay, which I'm using to do the password single sign-on registration of my device. So again, first was the username and password, which was the local username and the local user password, which I used to log into the device. And then when I'm doing the PSSO registration of the device, I'm entering my UPN and the password of that UPN, right, which is present in Entra. Now, once I enter this, then that credential is hashed, sent to Entra ID, password is validated. Now in step number 4, what happens is, now this password actually changes. So the password of the local account will still be ABC, but the password of ABC will now change to the same password that we had of the UPN. And that is exactly what this block is saying, that the password set locally on the device, and it is the password that is set locally on the device is the same password as the password of the UPN that was used to do the PSSO registration. Now, why is this important, or why is this relevant? This is important and relevant because there are two things that we are solving by doing this. The first thing that we are solving is, well, obviously if we are doing the PSSO registration, now the device is going to get the PSSO experience, right? That the end user opens any subsequent applications or websites, he does not have to enter the username and password again. It's authenticated automatically. The second advantage that we are getting now is, now the end user does not have to remember 2 different usernames and 2 different passwords. He only has to remember 1 password. And obviously he is going to remember his UPN. This username, obviously it's going to be populated every time you power on the MacBook. Every time you power on the MacBook, it shows the user account, the local account automatically, right? So you don't have to remember it, or I mean, you just need to remember obviously your username, but even if you forget, it's going to show you what the local user account is. But you no longer have to remember this password, because after the device underwent PSSO registration using the password sync option, the password of the UPN syncs in with the password of the local account. Therefore, this password and this password now become the same. 123 no longer exists. The same password is now present over here. Now let me just go back to the previous slide, and now I think this point will make more sense. So now what option 1 or password sync does is, it does what it is intended to do. First is, it provides us the SSO experience of the device, and second, it synchronizes the local account's password with the cloud IDP, meaning it synchronizes the password of the local account with the password of the UPN that was used to do the PSSO registration. And now you need to remember only 1 password, and that is the password of the UPN. Okay. So again, this slide is just talking about how this happens at the background. The user is doing the PSSO registration. The user is entering his UPN over here. When he enters his UPN and the password of that UPN, that password hash is sent to Entra ID. Entra ID is authenticating and making sure that the end user has entered the correct UPN and the correct password of that UPN, and then that password of that UPN is now set as the password of that local account. We will all see this during the demo, but I hope that this is clear, and this is different from the secure enclave flavor of PSSO. That is why I wanted to like spend more time on this and then make sure that we have understood this clearly. So this next slide pretty much talks about the same thing. It says that what is exactly changing in the device when we are doing PSSO registration with the password option. And over here, as you can see, the local accounts, local password now changes to the password that is set for the cloud account. Meaning now we will log into the device using the same local account, but instead of entering the old password, now its password will be the password of the account that was used to do the PSSO registration, right? And as you can see over here, there is a one password experience now. So the user no longer needs to remember two different passwords. Now the second option is secure enclave. Now secure enclave methodology of PSSO. Now before we deep dive into how secure enclave methodology works with PSSO, let's first understand what is secure enclave. Now at a very high level, think of secure enclave as, if you're coming from the Windows world, as something similar to a TPM or a trusted platform module, which is nothing but a chip or a hardware component that is present in the device. So secure enclave is if you look at the definition, secure enclave is on macOS is a dedicated hardware based security component, much like a TPM, and it is designed to protect cryptographic keys and perform sensitive operations. What keys are we talking about? We will come to that later on. But for now, just know that if there is a macOS device, inside of that macOS device, just like a Windows device will have TPM, the macOS device will have something called a secure enclave, which is nothing but a hardware component. And this hardware component is meant for storing something secure. And what is that secure thing? That secure thing is a cryptographic key, right? Or equivalent to a password. Now, if you are using secure enclave plus PSSO, like we saw, right? If I go back, we are looking at the different flavors, right? First was the password flavor of PSSO, which we saw, and the password flavor of PSSO, this was equivalent to Azure AD joining a device without Windows Hello for Business. The second flavor was secure enclave implementation of PSSO. And what this says over here is, this is if you're using platform single sign-on plus secure enclave, then this is equivalent to using Windows Hello for Business in a device. So the experience that you will get if you have platform single sign-on plus secure enclave is similar to what you would get if you have a Windows device which is Entra ID joined and which has Windows Hello for Business set up in it. And what is that experience? That experience is, to log into the device, you no longer have to enter your password of the local account or of the Entra ID account which you were doing earlier. If you have Windows Hello for Business set up, then you can authenticate using biometric, right? You can authenticate by maybe entering a PIN, or maybe by entering a fingerprint, or maybe by Face ID recognition. The same thing is happening over here as well. So when you have secure enclave and PSSO, then things are a little different. What is different? If you are using this methodology, then in this case, let's take the same flow again. This was a macOS device. So again, this is the username and password of the local account. ABC is the username, 123 is the password, just like we had in the previous case. This is the macOS device, okay? And in this macOS device, we have implemented platform single sign-on plus secure enclave methodology or secure enclave flavor. So in this case also, what will happen? The end user will log in entering username and password. Once he has logged in, he will get a prompt and he will go through the PSSO registration. Once the registration is done, then a cryptographic key or a certificate will be generated. The private key of this certificate will be stored in the TPM of this device. So TPM or secure enclave, which we talked about earlier. So in this case, what is happening is that when you're doing the registration, a key is getting generated. The private key is getting stored. Think of this TPM like a secured wallet, right? Like you have wallet in a bank where you're keeping things secured. So think of the bank as the laptop, and the vault in the bank as the TPM. Okay, so the vault in the bank is the TPM, and in this TPM you are putting your gold, right? Or you're putting the key, the private key. Now, whenever you are logging into the machine, you will use the same credential which you were using earlier, that is ABC, and the password is 123. So in this case, this password is not changing. So over here, when you're doing the PSSO plus SE registration, you are entering the same thing, right? You are entering the same UPN that you were entering earlier, right? The UPN of the user is not changing. The user's identity, the user's email ID or the UPN and password, that is still remaining the same. So when you are doing this step, like you were doing earlier, that is Platform Single Sign-On plus Secure Enclave registration, you are entering the username, that is pm@everythingaboutintune.com. You are entering its password. And once that is done, a key is getting generated. That key is getting stored in the TPM. But this username and this password is remaining the same. In the previous concept, we saw that this password got synced with this password and this password no longer existed. However, in this case, with Secure Enclave, that is not the case. Next time when you're logging into the device after the registration and everything is done, you still log into the device using ABC and 123. Once you have logged into the device, then whenever you have to access any subsequent website or application which requires a single sign-on, this cryptographic key will be fetched from the TPM, and this will be utilized for doing the authentication. Okay, so let's see what this slide is talking about. In case of Secure Enclave plus PSSO implementation, the local password stays as is because this password 123 is not changing. PSSO creates a hardware bound credential for stronger authentication. What does this mean? When we are doing this PSSO plus Secure Enclave, after the device is registered, a key is created, and this key is hardware bound, meaning it is bound to the Secure Enclave or the TPM, which is a hardware in the device. Right? So local back account password does not change. Local password remains the same, which is used to unlock the device like we are doing over here. And then a hardware bound credential or a hardware bound cryptographic key is created and stored in the TPM. It is non-exportable key stored in the device's Secure Enclave. So the flow is something like this. The user unlocks the device by password or touch or however he wants to unlock it, or by entering his password, which in this case is ABC. And then the hardware bound key which is present inside the Secure Enclave, this key, which is a FIDO-like key, non-exportable, which is not visible in the key chain of the macOS device, this key is now used for facilitating SSO in various applications in the browser. Now let's take a moment and compare on how does this compare with Windows Hello for Business. I know that over here we have seen, and I have mentioned that the experience is similar to Windows Hello for Business, right? So let's do a comparison on how does Windows Hello for Business in the Entra ID joint device work at the background, and how does that relate with a device which is a macOS and which has Secure Enclave plus PSSO implemented in it. So this is a quick comparison. First, let's understand what is Windows Hello for Business. Now, just for reference, Windows Hello for Business secures authentication in a Windows device by binding the user's identity to the device's inbuilt hardware, which is TPM. So instead of password, Windows Hello for Business generates a cryptographic key pair where the private key is protected by the TPM and never leaves the device, which is similar to what we are seeing over here. There is a cryptographic key pair that is generated. The private key over here is stored in the device. Okay. Now in case of Windows, whenever a user authenticates, the user can authenticate with PIN or biometric, which unlocks the device locally. And once the authentication is completed, that TPM is now accessible, and then that key in that TPM, which is hardware protected and non-exportable, it can then be used for further authentication. Since that key is hardware bound, non-exportable, it is phishing resistant. Nobody can steal it, right? Therefore, it is helpful in making sure that there are no attacks. Okay. So now let's compare, now that we know Windows Hello for Business, let's compare it with PSSO, Secure Enclave macOS implementation. In both the cases, a cryptographic key is generated. In case of Windows Hello for Business, the key is protected using TPM. In case of macOS PSSO plus Secure Enclave implementation, that cryptographic key is saved in the Secure Enclave, which is a hardware chip in the macOS device. In both cases, the keys stay on the device and they are non-exportable, and they are both phishing resistant. Yeah. And then local unlock, cloud proof. Now the user has to unlock the device in case of in both the cases the user has to unlock the device. In case of Windows Hello for Business, he's unlocking using biometric. In case of platform single sign-on plus Secure Enclave implementation, he is entering the same password, the same local password that he was using earlier, and it is phishing resistant. As we saw over here, both approaches reduce stolen password, credential risk, reuse risk is not there. Okay. All right. So this slide is pretty much talking about the same thing. Windows Hello for Business secures authentication, binding user identity instead of password. It generates a cryptographic key pair, private key stored in the TPM of the device, and then it's hardware protected, non-exportable. It provides a phishing resistant, right? Similar to what we have already seen. Now, how do both the flows compare? We have also discussed this. User signs in case of Windows Hello for Business, which requires a TPM. User signs in with his PIN, and then the TPM contains the cryptographic key, and that key is used for further authentication. In case of PSSO, user is signing in with his password. The cryptographic key was present in Secure Enclave, and that key in that Secure Enclave is then used for facilitating further single sign-on across applications. Yeah. All right. So the same pattern in both. Local hardware unlocks the private key, and Enter ID validates the cryptographic proof. All right. Now let's again understand via using block diagram on what is the working of Secure Enclave, like what is happening at the background. First is user triggers the PSSO registration. So like we saw over here, you are logging into the device using local username and password, and then over here you are undergoing the PSSO plus Secure Enclave registration, right? There is a prompt, you just click on that. So user triggers on the PSSO registration. The broker app, which in this case is Company Portal, it is going to create a public key and a private key pair, which is a certificate. A certificate has a public key and a private key, right? That private key is stored in the Secure Enclave of the device. So that private key is bound to the hardware of the device, and it is not marked as exportable. It cannot be copy pasted or exported anywhere. The public key is sent to Enter ID, and then the registration is complete. So over here the registration is complete, and the password of the local user remains unchanged. So once this is done, the end user will still log into the device using the same ABC and using the same password. Yeah. So these are the, high level steps. Obviously we are assuming that there is some prerequisite. The prerequisite is that the company portal needs to be present in the device. Even if you're using some other MDM, still company portal needs to be present in the device if you're using platform single sign-on with Secure Enclave, right? And then the second, that is prerequisite number 1. The prerequisite number 2 is that the PSSO policy needs to be pushed. PSSO policy plus Secure Enclave feature, that needs to be pushed by the MDM to the device, right? Only then the end user will be able to trigger the PSSO registration of the device. Okay, the end user sees a pop-up and then he registers the device. A certificate is created, certificate is bound to Secure Enclave. Now just FYI, this certificate was earlier present in the device's keychain, which means that if you were a local admin, as an attacker, you could just lift that certificate and then use it somewhere else. which was not very good. However, with PSSO now, with Secure Enclave, that certificate is no longer visible in the keychain. It's only present and visible in the Secure Enclave. Therefore, it cannot be lifted by anyone. And then, as I said, the broker application is over here is creating the public key and the private key pair, sending the private key to the Secure Enclave, sending the public key to the Enter ID. And once this is done, the registration is marked as completed. And then even if this device is now stolen, that is absolutely fine, because the private key was secured. Because the private key was secured in the hardware. We also need to remember that, let's say that you have got a specific application, and in that single sign-on is not happening. That might be true if your application is not talking to the single sign-on extension, meaning that application cannot access the key, the private key that is present in the secure enclave of the device. A very common example of that is, let's say, Google Chrome. Now, traditionally, if you had a macOS device onto which you had implemented platform single sign-on, and you had implemented the secure enclave flavor, and let's say that you using Chrome, you were trying to access some cloud protected resource which was behind conditional access, it would fail because Google Chrome could not access the key that was present in the secure enclave. Therefore, Microsoft built a Chrome extension so that Google Chrome can now access the cryptographic key which is present in the secure enclave.
All right, so in this slide, let's just recap the advantages of PSSO that we have understood until now. The first one is, if we are using secure enclave, then it strengthens our security by using device-bound pass keys, because in this case, the cryptographic key is being bound to the secure enclave hardware that is present in the device. If we are using the password option of PSSO, in that case, we are eliminating the need of having two different passwords, because the password syncs because the password becomes the same, right? Essentially, like we saw earlier, the password of the local account syncs and it becomes the same password as the password that was used to do the PSSO registration. And by doing the PSSO registration, what we're essentially doing is we are getting SSO experience across all the applications and the supported browser. All right, so now before we proceed, there are a couple of important points that I wanted to call out. First is, as we spoke about, the device once we are doing a PSSO registration of the device with secure enclave, the device generates a certificate. The certificate has key, public key, private key. The private key is stored in the secure enclave of the device, and that certificate is no longer visible in the device's keychain. It was visible earlier, but now no longer that certificate is visible, and this is for security reason, so that nobody can log into the device, export that certificate from that keychain, and then lift and shift it to some other device and then make maluse of it, right? So this is one thing, that certificate will no longer be visible in the keychain. Second is, if there is any application or anything that needs to undergo device-based conditional access check, then it would have to talk to the PSSO broker in the device, because only the PSSO broker, which in this case is the company portal application, can access the certificate which is there in the secure enclave. So applications that do not talk to the SSO extension, like for example, let's say Google Chrome by default does not talk with the company portal application in the device. Therefore, if you're trying to access Exchange Online from Google Chrome browser and Exchange Online is behind conditional access, then which requires the device to be marked as compliant, even if your device is compliant, if you're trying to access Exchange Online from the browser, from the Chrome browser, you will still be getting denied via conditional access policy, because Chrome browser by default cannot interact with the SSO extension application, that is a company portal app, which in turn cannot get therefore it cannot get the key, the cryptographic key which is there in secure enclave. Hence, as we had discussed earlier, to come across this issue, Microsoft had built the Chrome extension, which needs to be utilized in order to get SSO experience. All right. Now that we have understood what is platform single sign-on, what are the advantages, and what are the different flavors of SSO, now let's see how to deploy it. Now, platform single sign-on can be deployed via any MDM. Right now, we are concerned about how to deploy it from Microsoft Intune. Now, the first thing that you see over here, the first step, this again is optional. If you have a brand new device, then, and if it's a corporate device, then you would probably be using automated device enrollment, also known as DEP, the device enrollment program by ABM or Apple Business Manager, or ASM, Apple School Manager. So many names I know. So you will be using, which is equivalent of autopiloting a Windows device if you are coming from the Windows background. So in that case, you will be creating a ADE profile. This ADE profile is going to facilitate kind of zero-touch enrollment of the device. However, you might as well enroll the device manually as well. It doesn't matter how you are enrolling the device. Once the device is enrolled, then everything that the admin has configured is going to take effect in the device, right? And what is it that the admin has to configure? The admin has to deploy the company portal application as required. And once the company portal application, which is the broker application, is installed, then the PSSO policy is going to come down. So the admin also has to create the platform single sign-on settings catalog policy in the Intune portal, and he has to assign it. Now in the assignment checker, we will talk about how exactly the assignment should be done. But these, at a very high 1,000 feet overview, would be, these are the 4 different blocks that the admin has to configure. For taking care of enrollment, the ADE profile needs to be created. If the end user is doing manual enrollment by downloading the company portal application from manually from the website, that is also fine. However, the admin, if the admin is doing it, then the admin has to facilitate the enrollment. The admin has to push the company portal application as required, and obviously the PSSO policy, and has to take care of the assignment as well. Now, as far as creating the PSSO policy is concerned, it is very simple. I'll just very quickly walk you through it because we are anyways going to cover it in demo. So all you have to do is go to the configuration blade in the Intune portal under macOS, and then the platform obviously is macOS, and the profile type is going to be settings catalog. So we make a settings catalog policy over here. We click on add settings. Then we have to go under authentication, and inside of that there is extensible single sign-on. And inside of that, there are a lot of settings that needs to be configured. It's all documented. We will see this in the demo as well, but it is very simple. PSS, platform single sign-on policy, that we are configuring from the MDM. This is nothing but, it's just another device configuration policy that we are creating and that we are assigning to a group. That's it. Now this PSSO policy is going to contain a lot of settings, right? Over here, we are going to determine the flavor, whether it's going to be, which flavor of PSSO we are implementing, whether it's going to be password, whether it's going to be secure enclave, whether it's going to be smart card, and a lot of other attributes as well. Once it is deployed over here, you can see that these were all the settings that I had configured. Now, I won't go into very details of this for now. We will go into details of this later on, but over here you can see that if I was using the password method, therefore that option is selected over here. These are all information that is already documented, and once this policy is deployed to the device, over here you can see it shows as succeeded, and the end user gets a prompt which tells him to trigger the PSSO registration. And when he gets the prompt, he clicks on it, enters his UPN, and then the PSSO registration happens. Once it is deployed over here, you can see when you click on this, so over here you can see that one device has got it. Right now, when you click on the view report, it will show you all the settings that have come down successfully. This one is for older version of macOS, therefore it is showing as not applicable. However, all the other settings have successfully come down. All right, settings have come down. What about the logs? The most important thing, what are the logs we need to check to ensure that PSSO registration has happened successfully, or what are the logs we should check if we are facing any issues with PSSO registration? That is something we are going to see next. So as far as logs are concerned, now I'm talking about device side logs. I'm not talking about any Intune service side logs. to which by default we will not have access to, only Microsoft engineers will have access to it. So right now we are only talking about device side logs. So I have categorized the device side logs into two different parts. First is there are some commands that we can run in the terminal in the affected macOS device and see what is the status of PSSO and troubleshoot it. And second is in that affected device, we can take a look over the macOS system logs as well. So we are going to take a look over the commands that we can run as well as the system logs that we can see and what is the expected behavior. So the command that we can run from the terminal in a macOS device wherein PSSO registration was done is this. It is app-SSO platform-s. Okay. This is the command that we have to run. Now, over here, you can see how does the output of that command looks like when PSSO registration is not done in the device. So over here, you can see I ran this command and everything is null. There is no output, and this is just a five lines. There are only 5 lines. Everything is showing as null. Now, when I run the same command in the same device, when it has undergone the PSSO registration successfully, this is what the output looks like. Now you can see that there are a lot of things in the output, and we need to double click on each of them, and we need to understand what each of them are trying to tell us. Over here, you can see there is something called token endpoint URL, and this is pointing to our tenant. So this is my tenant ID. Okay. So this device has received the PSSO profile from my tenant. There was a device configuration policy that I had made in my tenant and I deployed to this device. Therefore, that tenant ID shows up over here. The unique identifier claim name, this is OID. This OID means it is the object ID of the user who has done the PSSO registration. What is that object ID? We are going to see that later on. However, if you want to jump the gun, this is the object ID of that user, okay, or the UPN. Now, the next one, this shows us what flavor of PSSO we have implemented in this device. You can implement secure enclave. If it is showing none (0), then this means that we have implemented the password flavor of PSSO. But this is what these 3 lines are signifying. Now over here, the created timestamp shows when did the PSSO registration successfully happen in the device. Okay. And then over here, you can see devices received the Kerberos ticket, the UPN that was used to enroll the device. It's containing a lot of other information. There is also the PO user state normal 01, which means that the PSSO registration in the device was successful and it is healthy. We also have PO login type password. This is the value we are going to see if we have implemented the password flavor of PSSO. If we implement the secure enclave flavor, then the value over here will change. During the lab, we are going to deploy the secure enclave flavor, and then over there we can see what the value is. And at the bottom, you can see there is a kind of a summary, if you would say, the SSO token has been received, the time is showing over here, and the expiration is showing over here, and all this information, right? So this is what the output of this command, the app-SSO platform-s, looks like when device has not undergone PSSO registration, and this is what it is looking like when it has undergone the PSSO registration. The screenshot is pretty much also talking about the same thing. I've just categorized it into different parts. Like over here, it's showing the SSO recovery and health and expiration. Over it is showing the login type and the flavor of PSSO. Over here, it is showing whether the Kerberos ticket has been received or not. Over here, you can see that the Kerberos ticket has been received. Over here, you can see the timestamp on when the PSSO registration had happened. And over here, we are seeing this also is showing the flavor of PSSO. This is showing the object ID is the object ID of the user, which is tying to this, as we had seen over here. And this is the tenant ID that from which the device has received the PSSO profile. All right. Now the second is the macOS system logs. So just like if you're coming from a Windows background, Windows devices have the event via logs, the event via system logs. Similarly, macOS devices also have the macOS system logs. Now, either we can go through all those logs manually, or we can just run this command in the terminal, and it is going to sort. I mean, it is going to search for anything with, if you would call this kind of a bundle ID, and it is going to give us all the information relevant to this. We can filter it. I'm going to show you how it is going to look like in a working scenario. We can compare it with a non-working set of logs and try to figure out where exactly is the error. So this is going to filter output to include only messages related to com.apple.app SSO subsystem, which is responsible for platform SSO functionality. The detail, so when we are going through these logs, we are going to see whether the user registration has happened or not, whether there are any issues with plugin or not, activity or not, whether there were any failed registrations or not, whether there were any communication breakdown or not. Okay, so I ran this command. So again, I'm going to do this in demo as well, but for now, just trust me on this. I ran this command in the terminal, and I ran this command in a device wherein PSSO registration had not happened. And then I did the PSSO registration, and then I again ran the command. Now I'm just trying to show you the comparison of what we see in the logs before and after. Okay. So before we did the PSSO registration, when we ran the command, it shows that for this bundle ID kind of a thing, if you would call it, or the correct word over here is the subsystem, it was showing that no device configuration or data to load. Right over here, you can again see no device configuration or data to load. There is no such file. Okay. What this means is platform SSO was not applied, device and user were not registered. Now, after the PSSO registration was done, you can see this information over here. You can see the URL that we had seen earlier as well. You can, and this is in a way showing that the device has received the PSSO profile and it has implemented it. You can also see the authentication method, which is implying the flavor of PSSO that was used, and it also shows that the setting has come down from an MDM, and it's containing a lot of other information. So this section of the log is suggesting that this log has been taken from a device which was PSSO registered, enrolled to Intune, and the flavor was secure enclave, versus this log is taken from a device wherein PSSO registration was not done of the device. Okay, moving on. What are the other important things that we can see in the logs? In the same logs, we could see that there was no app SSO URL that was found. There was no extension. It failed to find any extension. Okay, and the broker was not functional. However, after PSSO registration was done, you can now see all the URLs that are relevant. Now, these URLs are something that we actually mention in the device configuration profile. Now, I don't want to go into very details of this, but if I just give you a sneak peek of it, over here you can see that when we had made the profile, the device configuration profile, we had mentioned some URLs over there, right? There are these 3 URLs. So those 3 URLs are visible in the logs as well. Over here you can see that the URL is visible, right? Those 3 URLs. So again, this also shows that the device has received the PSSO profile, settings catalog profile, the registration has happened, and the device is now bound to those endpoints which we had mentioned in the profile. And then lastly, if we take a look over the broker activity, initially if we see there are no SSO tokens found, nothing is found in the keychain, and there were only invalid parameters. However, after the PSSO registration is done, we can see the bundle ID over here, the bundle ID of the SSO extension, which is going to be used. And we don't see any error over here. We don't see any invalid parameter, thereby showing that PSSO registration of the device was done successfully. Again, just wanted to give you a sneak peek of the 2 logs that are important, or the 2 places where we can see the logs. As I said, one is the command that we can run in the terminal, which was app-sso-platform-s. And then the other one was the macOS system logs, which we can go through. We can run this command to only filter the relevant things related to platform single sign-on from the macOS system logs. And these are the things on the right that we are expecting to see in case of a successful PSSO registration. All right. Now let's take a look over what is the flow that is visible to the end user. The end user does not have to create any profile, or he doesn't do any targeting, or he doesn't have to like go to settings catalog policy and all of that, right? The end user will be using his machine as is. So let's say that I am the end user. I was using my machine. Just half an hour earlier, my Intune admin created a PSSO profile and he did all the targeting and all of that stuff he did. Now, what is the flow that I am going to see at the end user? What are the changes I'm going to see is what we are going to see now. The first thing that happens is that the user gets a pop-up for initiating the PSSO registration. So over here, you can see I was just using this device, the company portal application was open, and suddenly I get this pop-up which says that please register with your identity provider. Okay, so the end user gets this pop-up, and this pop-up is telling the end user that you need to do a PSSO registration. Okay, this is triggered by the operating system and not Intune. Apple determines when this pop-up is going to come, and it has to make sure there are some prerequisites that needs to be met for this pop-up to come. What are the prerequisites? The first prerequisite is that the device needs to be enrolled to Intune, obviously, right? Only then the device is going to receive the relevant profiles and policies from Intune. The second is the device needs to have the broker application in the device. And what is the broker application? For us, the broker application is the company portal app. If you're using some other MDM, then in that case also you need to have the company portal broker application in order to do the PSSO registration. Okay, and this prompt is coming when the device is at the desktop screen and the enrollment is completed. Obviously, the enrollment is completed, as I said over here, right? So end user's experience is the user suddenly gets this prompt over here on the right top of the screen telling him to do the registration. Once he clicks on it, then there are these things that the end user is made aware of. Right? The end user is told that you need to register your device with your identity provider. You can synchronize your macOS password if the password flavor of PSSO is set up, or if the secure enclave is set up, then your local password will not be synchronized. However, it's just letting you know. It's also telling you that the organizational and personal data can be accessed. This is just a prompt that we just need to be aware of. Now the end user has to click on continue, and when he clicks on continue, he has to now undergo a local authentication. Okay, so he has to the username of the local user is already pre-populated. He has to enter the password. Why is this happening? This is happening to ensure that the user who is supposed to use the device is actually in front of that device. It's not like that the user has gone somewhere else and somebody else came into his seat and he clicked on this prompt, because if that happens, then that person will not know the password, right? So this is to make sure that the person who is the legitimate owner of the device is doing the PSSO registration, and therefore he has to enter the local credentials. Okay, he clicks on it, he enters the credentials, he clicks on unlock, and then the PSSO registration is going to start. Now the user has to enter his Entra ID credentials. Okay, so this credential is the credential to which we have targeted the PSSO profile from the Intune portal, the settings catalog profile. This is the profile that this is the UPN that we had actually used to enroll the device, and it needs to have Intune license and all of that applied to it, right? So we enter the username, we enter the password. If there is any MFA, then that MFA, you have to go through that MFA as well. For me, I have a MFA that has been set for this account. So you need to have Authenticator or something like that in a different device from where you are going to approve. And once that happens, then the screen is coming up over here where the PSSO registration is happening. And then you need to enter the password of this UPN again. Over here, I'm entering the password. I'm clicking on sign in, and then the platform single sign-on registration completes. Okay. Over here, you can see that your password has been synchronized. It is saying your password has been synchronized because over here, I'm using the password flavor of PSSO. If you're not using the password flavor, then the prompt will be different. And over here, it is saying that display EAI demo PSSO macOS account, because this is the name that I had provided, right? I mean, you can customize this name. This would probably be the name of your organization. Okay. So at this stage, the PSSO registration is complete. The device has generated everything that it needed to generate, and beyond this, the expectation is that the end user should be getting a complete PSSO experience in the device. If you are using secure enclave, then you need to click on this toggle to allow autofill. Okay. Now the end user just has to click on this toggle, and once he has clicked on this toggle and allowed autofill for company portal, it's just going to give a prompt over here that successfully configured your passkey for a work or school account. You can just click on close. Now you might say that what if the user does not click on this slider and does not enable autofill? Well, in that case, he is not going to get complete PSSO experience. Therefore, at the end of this video, I am going to share with you some best practices to ensure that we are not dependent on the end user to click on this toggle. But for now, I don't want to overcomplicate things. Just for now, when you're doing a PSSO registration, you're going to get a prompt over here on the right hand side top, like we saw over here. You have to enter the local credentials, then you have to enter your UPN details, you have to undergo the MFA, and then the PSSO registration completes. If the admin had deployed the secure enclave flavor, then the end user has an additional step of clicking on this toggle for allowing autofill. Okay. All right. Now, if you are using secure enclave or PSSO in both, or password option in both case, what happens is if you are going into the settings, if you go into privacy and security, over here, I mean, in the profiles, you can see all these information, and all these information are coming from the profile that we have created, right? It is over here, this is telling us whether we are using secure enclave or password option of PSSO. We can see the URLs over here as well, right? And then if you go into the profile under device management, you will be able to see com.apple.extensible.sso, and then this is also going to contain a lot of those information. The URL will be present over here as well. It shows authentication method. It shows this identifier as well. This identifier is also something that we had configured in the profile. It shows us the installed date, stuff like that. And then if you click on that local user, over here I have gone to the user, and then I've clicked on that local user, and over there you can see the name of the user and stuff like that. You can see that the registration of the device was done and the SSO tokens are present in the device. Also, if you go into the users and groups, over there, if you click on network account server, and if you click on edit, over here also you can see the Mac SSO extension that is present and the device is registered. Now, there are two things. The experience of PSSO is a little different depending upon at what stage the PSSO profile was deployed. So let's say that I have a device, and in that device, I was using that device, and tomorrow morning, the admin deployed the PSSO profile with password option to that device which was already in use. It's going to get a specific behavior. I mean, you are going to see a specific behavior or a flow. Versus, let's say that the admin has already deployed the PSSO profile with password option to a user, and now the user takes a fresh device, enrolls his device. So in that case, the enrollment is being done when the PSSO profile is targeted. Versus in first case, the enrollment was already done, the device was already in use, and now the PSSO profile is coming down. So the behavior is a little different, like you might see some prompts additional. Like over here, in this case, we are looking at a device which was wherein the PSSO profile was deployed and then the device was enrolled. So over here, you can see that in the company portal itself, it is going to tell you that you need to register the device, and then you are going to get a registration prompt over here as well. So you see something in the company port inside the company portal application as well, telling you that you need to register the device. And in this case, the until and unless you do the registration, until and unless I click on this and I go to the registration, the device will show as Entra ID registered. The device is enrolled, as you can see over here, but the device's entry will show as Entra ID registered. And once so that's what it is showing over here. Before the PSSO policy was targeted, so this is a device which was, again, let me just recap. I have a device which was already in use. Okay, it was already enrolled, everything was working fine. In that device, when I deploy the PSSO profile, let's say that the end user has not taken any action yet. He has not clicked on this yet. He is just ignoring this. As long as he ignores this, the device's record will show as Entra ID registered in Azure. The below snippet is from a device which was enrolled to Intune with no PSSO policy targeted at the time of enrollment, or the PSSO policy is targeted but the end user has not taken any action. There is no additional pop-ups in the device during the enrollment phase except the ones that we already expect to see, and the device shows as Entra ID registered. Now in this device, after later on, the admin is targeting the PSSO profile and the end user is going to the PSSO setup. Once he does that, now the device shows as Entra ID joined. Again, this is just a subtle difference that I saw. Therefore, I thought that I would just mention. But I hope that we have by now understood what is the expected flow. Like, what are the screens that we are going to see? Like, first we get a prompt, and then what are the screens that the end user is going to see, so that if you are deploying this, maybe you can create a Word file or something like that, create a SOP, share it with the end user so that the end user knows what to expect. All right, so the next thing that we are going to talk about is a new feature related to platform single sign-on for macOS devices that we recently have got, and we are going to understand what is the significance of this feature. So if you guys remember, when we were looking at the platform single sign-on flow, the end user gets a prompt notification in the device, right? A prompt notification which he is getting, and once he has gone through everything, this is the prompt notification that he gets. He has to click on it, he goes through all these screens, and once everything is done, then he gets a notification like this. But what if the user ignores that notification? What if he gets that notification but does not take any action on it? Well, if that's the case, then the device is not going to be registered with PSSO. As a result, the device is not going to get the PSSO related experience. However, the admin has done his job. The admin has deployed the PSSO relevant profile down to the device. But now we are dependent on the end user to take that manual action of clicking on that pop-up and doing the registration. That is exactly what this feature is, that on the left-hand side, this is talking about. The platform signal sign-on registration only started after reaching the desktop, and it required manual action via a separate notification. And if you don't go through the notification, if you don't do the registration, then then the device is not going to be registered with PSSO, leading to compliance gaps and stuff like that. Now, a new setting is available as a part of the ADE profile that we make. As a part of that setting, you can enforce the PSSO registration as a part of the ADE out-of-the-box setup screens. Meaning, it's not like once the device is enrolled via ADE, you will go into the desktop screen and now another registration prompt will come and now the user has to undergo that. Now that registration prompt is embedded into the ADE flow. We will see all the video later on, but right now just understand that as a part of the ADE flow itself, the PSSO registration is happening, and we are not dependent on the end user now to take a manual action after the device is enrolled and the device is at the desktop screen. Okay, that's what this point is talking about. Now the device registration happens during the setup assistant screen before the user even reaches the desktop. Therefore, we are not waiting for any prompt to come. Now, what this feature enables is, now this screenshot I have taken from our official documentation, which we will go through in detail during the demo. But what this is saying is that the Microsoft Enter device registration now happens during ADE. The device registers with Microsoft Enter ID even before the user reaches the desktop screen. A hardware-bound workplace join certificate is issued, and it is stored securely. It will be stored in secure enclave, as we have seen earlier. Now, early device identity, the device identity is established early in the provisioning process, enabling immediate access to resources protected by conditional access. Instead, rather than it going to the desktop screen and then the end user clicking on the registration prompt and doing the registration, all that time is saved. And the Platform SSO credential during the initial setup, as we said, when configured with secure enclave, the credentials are stored in devices secure enclave, which you already know, providing hardware-bound, phishing-resistant protection aligned with zero trust principle of Microsoft. And minimize delays because user no longer has to. So user arrives at the desktop screen signed in and platform single sign-on enabled, because by that time the registration has already happened, and we are no longer looking at a state wherein the user will go into the desktop screen and then the PSSO flow will happen. There are a few prerequisites for this feature to work. First is macOS 26 and later. Second is that the device needs to be enrolled as ADE. So if you're not using Apple Business Manager, if you have done a manual enrollment of that device, in that case, this flow will not happen. And in that case, if the PSSO profile is deployed, the user will enroll, then later on he will receive a registration prompt for PSSO. However, only if you're using ADE, only if your macOS is 26 and later, and only if your company portal version is 5.2604.0 or later, which is deployed as an app from Intune as required. Only in that case, only if the combination of these three things are happening, that is, you have a macOS supported device and your ADE profile deployed, and in that ADE profile you have set up this setting which is enabled registration during setup, and the company portal app was also deployed, then you will be able to get this flow. And over there is a couple of settings which says that await final configuration set to yes. We will see all these settings later.
I hope that by now at least we have understood what this feature is for and what problem this is solving. Now, recap of the old PSSO flow. Again, we have seen this multiple times. Earlier, if you're enrolling a device via ADE, then when you're going through the ADE flow, setup assistant will complete, the local account for the user is created. Now the device lands at the macOS desktop screen. The end user logs into the company portal after he launches it, if it's with user affinity, and after he has launched the company portal app, then after a few minutes or after some time, the device gets the PSSO configuration profile, and then he gets that registration prompt, and then the end user finishes the registration, and then he gets the benefit of PSSO. However, the key friction was that the benefit of PSSO will be availed by the end user only after he manually does the registration after getting the registration prompt. Until he does that, there is nothing that the admin could do, or the end user was not forced. Now if we talk about the new background flow, over here you can see that there is this new setting that is available. There are two settings that are actually available. One is the setting in the PSSO profile. So this screenshot is from the PSSO settings catalog profile, and this screenshot is from the ADE profile that we are creating, and we have to enable this feature in both the places. So in the PSSO profile over here, you can see there is this setting which says enable registration during setup. So we need to check on this while we are making other selections under the PSSO profile. And if we look at the description of this, it says that if true, the system enables the platform single sign-on registration process during the setup assistant on the device running macOS 26 or later, which we have already seen as prerequisite, and set this key to true when configuring platform single sign-on before enrollment using this error response. And then over here for AD, you see that there is this setting which says enable create first user during setup, If true, the device uses platform single sign-on to create the first user account on Mac during the setup assistant screen. So we have to set these two settings in order for this new feature to work. Over here you can see it says that as far as the new flow is concerned, the device powers on, it goes through the ADE enrollment flow, user signs in for setup assistant, enrollment is initiated. As a part of the enrollment flow itself, Intune applies the SSO policy, and then Company Portal installs. You might have to go through the login a couple of times, and then the device gets registered with the enter ID, desktop is reached, SSO is active, and then now if you are trying to access Teams or any other application in browser, now everything works fine. I will go through this documentation when we are doing the demo. I don't want to go through the documentation right now. And over here you can see that if you're using the password authentication method, then you need to enable this setting, which is enable create user during setup. This setting needs to be created for password flavor of platform single sign-on. All right. Now there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind if we are using this new feature, this feature of enabling platform single sign-on as a part of device provisioning for ADE devices. There are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. First is, this is only possible for single user devices, not for kiosks setup of devices or for devices which are shared. Apple explicitly says that the SA based flow, the setup assistant based flow for PSSO is intended for one-to-one deployments, because the first authenticator of the device becomes the device's primary user. Now shared iPad style scenarios should stay on the old way of first creating a local account as a part of the ADE enrollment, and then later on the end users will be getting that prompt, the registration prompt, where they'll have to go through the registration. Now network at first boot is mandatory. Now when you're doing an ADE based enrollment, obviously the device needs to be connected to the internet. Only then ADE enrollment will happen. Just like when you do autopilot for Windows, the device needs to have internet connectivity. Similarly over here as well, when you're doing PSSO in setup assistant, obviously if you're it's a part of ADE enrollment flow, therefore it goes without saying that the device needs to have internet connectivity. The advantage is the provisioning becomes more towards zero touch, like not obviously 100% zero touch, because the user still has to enter his username and password, but still becomes a lot like zero touch, and lesser password reset issues. These are the advantages that anyways we are going to get with PSSO. Key things to remember. Now these are important. There are some important things. We need to have three policies. First is the settings catalog policy for PSSO, the deployment of Company Portal LOB application as required, and then the ADE enrollment profile. Now the recommendation is all should be assigned to the same static group of devices or users. Okay. Don't assign it to, don't have a setup wherein you're assigning this to user to group 1, assigning this to group 2, and assigning this to group 3, wherein you are saying that all these three groups contain the same user or device, therefore it should work. Okay. The second thing is have static groups only. The feature does not work if the device, if you're using device groups or dynamic groups. Okay, so over here I think I mistakenly said user group or device group. This needs to be obviously a user group, and then it should not be a device group, and it should not be a dynamic group. So it should be a static user group, even though over here we are saying that it should be a device/user affiliated with the group. So probably we'll go through the documentation and get clarity on this. One SSO policy per device. Well, obviously if you're having multiple autopilot profiles for the same device, what's the use, right? The device anyways will go through only one autopilot flow. Similarly, you will have one ADE profile deployed to the device, right? Similarly, have one PSSO profile deployed to the device. Don't have multiple, because if you do, then it can cause conflicts, right? Latest version of Company Portals. This is the latest version for now, that is 5.2604.0. So you need to have this version or later, macOS 26 or later, and then the recommendation is using secure enclave, because we already know the advantages of secure enclave.
All right. So until now, we have seen that if the device is registered with ABM, then the setup assistant-based PSSO can be used. If it is not registered with ABM, then we have already seen how the experience is, that the end user gets a prompt like this, as we have already seen before, and then the experience is he clicks on it and then he clicks on continue and does the entire PSSO registration. But as we have already discussed, the problem arises because the end user might as well ignore this prompt, right? So even though the PSSO policy is deployed, what if the end user never clicks on this prompt and does the PSSO registration, right? How does the admin cater to that? Because all the admin can until now do is deploy the PSSO policy, but now we are dependent on the end user to undergo a manual action. So now we are going to see how we can cater to that. So there is a PowerShell script that we can alternatively use, and we are going to see how that script is going to help. It's available in GitHub. Now the intention is ensuring that the end user completes the PSSO registration by proactively notification and setting up of a Swift dialog box. So this is the script that I have. We will see this in the demo as well. It's there in GitHub. Now what this script does is it brings up a prompt like this, and as you can see, you cannot dismiss this prompt. And this prompt will block you. Think of it like an ESP, wherein you're not going to go into the desktop screen unless and until the apps are installed, right? So similar to that, this is a custom prompt using Swift dialog that is coming up, and it's mandating you to register the device. Otherwise, your device will not be usable, right? So what this, again, I'll not go into very details of this. This is just a custom script that is present. I just thought that I would just take a moment and just explain that this can maybe increase your efficiency a little bit more if your devices are not ADE enrolled, and if you are rolling out PSSO, and if you think that there are a lot of devices wherein the end user have not manually taken the action. So what it does is the script runs after the enrollment, and what it does is it installs Swift dialog and creates a launch daemon. And every time that, so let's say that you get this prompt, but then you restart the device. You say that, no, I won't do the re-registration. Or let's say that you click on this register and then you start the PSSO registration and then you close it, right? You will then be at the desktop screen. So, or let's say that when you get this prompt, you reboot your machine and you log in again and come into the desktop screen. In that case also, after a specific amount of time, that is after 30 minutes, the user will again get that pop-up screen, which we are going to see, right? So it's happening because the launch daemon at the backend is making sure that the Swift dialog box is coming up. The launch daemon checks the PSSO registration using app SSO. So at the background, we are checking first we have logic where we are checking whether the device is already enrolled to Intune or not. Obviously, it is enrolled, whether it is already PSSO registered or not. If it is not registered, and if the company portal app is present, then the Swift dialog box is going to open, and then the user will be prompted with that screen, right? And then the device is going to register with PSSO, and then all the relevant script and everything is going to be deleted. So again, this was just an FYI to let you know that there is a script in GitHub that exists, which deploys a self-healing launch daemon that waits for 30 minutes, which is customizable. You can customize that in the screen after Intune enrollment, and periodically checks the Platform SSO registration status using the app-SSO command, and then reminds the user that your device is not registered, and it gives that pop-up prompt and then automatically removes everything once the PSSO registration is done. So again, a cool little trick which you might want to deploy if you're seeing that a lot of end users are not going through the PSSO registration, even if the admin has deployed the PSSO profile and the devices are not ABM enrolled. All right. Now, future improvement. Well, obviously, one of the future improvement that I can think of is right now we are dependent on a third-party script right over here. So the reason why we are dependent on this script is because we want to force the end user to go through the PSSO registration if it's a non-ABM device. If it is an ABM device, then we know that it's a part of the setup assistant flow, right? So probably one future enforcement could be forcing PSSO on non-AD devices without depending upon a third-party script that we are doing over here, because this is a workaround. It's a working workaround, but this is a workaround wherein the admin has to deploy an additional script and target it and stuff like that, right? So that is exactly what this slide is talking about, that currently the prompt that the end user gets is dismissible for registering their device. Therefore, we have to rely on a script. Therefore, we would love to have remove the dependency from scripts for non-ADE devices. All right. Now, there are a couple of important considerations that I would like us to keep in mind while we are doing a PSSO deployment. And first is the assignment. We need to make sure that we are carefully evaluating the assignment, because for Platform SSO setting to come down on a device, if a device which has user affinity, it is not, as we have already seen in one of the earlier slides as well. This is just a reminder that it is not recommended or not supported to assign to a device group. So assign it to a user group and assign, and do not use filters. And second is, for PSSO registration to work, there are some endpoints that needs to be whitelisted. Now we need to make, if the device is connected to the internet, absolutely fine. If it's connected to the intranet or to your corp Wi-Fi, then we have to work with the network team to make sure that these endpoints are excluded. And most of them are either Microsoft endpoints or Apple endpoints, right? So there, make sure that there is no TLS inspection that is happening for these endpoints, and these endpoints are visible. All right. Now, there is one more very important thing that I want to discuss. Now, this is something that has been very recently made available. This is also a script, but this script is coming directly from Microsoft, and I want to really talk about this. I believe this feature was, this script or this capability was released probably this month itself in July 2026. So one of the things that you guys would have seen is, when we were going through the previous slides, and you'll see in the demo as well, that if you're doing PSSO registration using Secure Enclave, then once, as a part of the registration, one of the screen that comes up is this one, wherein you have to slide this toggle. By default, this toggle is turned off. The end user has to slide this toggle, and what this is allowing is, it is allowing you to use your autofill, right? So you need to configure autofill in for Company Portal application. Now, this is a part of the PSSO flow. Now, given that the end user has to click on this slider, it brings the obvious question. That is, there is one more step wherein we are dependent on the end user. What if the end user is not doing this slider? What if the end user, it's like equivalent to enrolling your device, right? If you're enrolling your iOS device to Intune, you have to download the management profile, right? And then you have to go to the settings and then install it, and then come back into the company portal, and then it checks for compliance. So what I mean by that is, you are dependent on the end user, right, to install the profile. The profile downloads by default, but it does not install automatically, right? Similarly, over here, if you are doing a PSSO registration with Secure Enclave, in one of the steps, you have to click on this slider to enable autofill for Company Portal. Now, that brings an obvious question. What if the end user is not doing this? If the end user does not do this, then he is going to get PSSO experience, but he is not going to get full PSSO benefits, because that is one of the important sliders that needs to be toggled. Otherwise, we have seen that in many, autofill of credentials will not happen. And when you're accessing many websites and browsers, you will not get PSSO experience, even though the device is enrolled and is registered with PSSO. And this is exactly what this slide is talking about, the need for Company Portal Autofill extension. Now, Platform SSO improves the sign-in on Macs, but by itself, it does not give a fully password-like experience in many cases, until and unless you have enabled this option. So password, if you want to go, get the complete SSO experience in all the browsers, then you still are dependent on Company Portal Autofill option being enabled, which is nothing but just a toggle that needs to be enabled. Now, there is this link that I will go through and show you guys the Microsoft official documentation. But before that, I just want to let you know at a higher level what this link is going to talk about. So that link has nothing but a script. and that script is going to check whether the device is enrolled, whether the device is already platform single sign-on registered or not. And if it is, then it is going to check whether company portal autofill is enabled or not. If it is not enabled, then the script is going to enable it, right? Plain and simple. So it's making sure that the last mile user gap is taken care of. And since the user have to manually enable the browser autofill extension by that slider, and if the user does not do it, then he does not get the PSSO experience, and then he has to enter the credentials while he is in a browser. So this matters because now we are dependent upon the end user to do that toggle. There are many cases where they will not do the toggle, and then they will raise support cases and stuff like that, right? Therefore, what we have done is Microsoft has shared a script. What that script does is it first checks whether the device is enrolled or not, it checks whether PSSO is detected or not, and then the script will run silently, and then it will enable the extension, and after that we will get seamless access. Okay, all right. So I'll show you guys that link, but this is just a snippet of that script. And what that script is doing is first it's waiting for a user session. It is detecting whether a user session is active or not to ensure that the device is ready. Then it is verifying the PSSO registration of that device to make sure the device is platform registered, Platform SSO registered, because this script is going to enable that toggle. That toggle enablement will only happen if the device is already PSSO registered, right? And then it is going to detect whether it is going to wait and see whether a company portal autofill extension is available on the device or not, and whether it is enabled or not. If it is not enabled, it is going to enable it by first detecting it, and then the script is going to enable the autofill programmatically, enabling the need for the users to manually configure the settings in the system setting like we just saw over here. And then this is how we deploy the script. It is just a normal script that we are deploying. And yeah, now let me quickly show you guys this link. So this is the documentation. As you can see, it was written on 29th of July itself. So 2026 is kind of new. And over here, you can see what this is talking about. It is saying that platform single sign-on improves how macOS devices establish identity with intra-ID. We already know what platform single sign-on does, right? However, in many cases, we have seen that the company portal autofill extension also needs to be enabled, and we are dependent upon the end user to go through that toggle. The challenge is that the end users might or might not do it. And if they are not doing it, then even if the device is successfully registered, user will still fall back into manually entering the credentials if company portal autofill extension is not enabled, right? So that is exactly what the script is doing. If I scroll down over here, we can see how we can deploy the script from Intune. And then over here, we have a video as well. Over here in the video, we can see that the user undergoes the experience, and then company portal autofill is automatically enabled. So over here you can see actually this is showing two demos. First, it is showing how to deploy this script for enabling autofill, and second, it is also showing how to use the setup assistant based platform SSO because ABM is being used. This is a combined demo, and as you can see, as a part of enrollment, the device will undergo, this is the screen, as a part of the enrollment itself, the device gets a prompt to undergo PSSO registration. So we are not dependent to go to the home screen and then get that prompt which the user can ignore, or we don't have to deploy any script or stuff like that. And over here, you can see the device is getting enrolled. As a part of that, the PSSO registration is happening. Local account is getting created. These are all optional prompts, which I'm just going to skip. And then since there is a MFA, you will have to go to the authenticator. Now you see we are at the desktop screen. And then now the device is now the device is enrolled to Intune. All the applications are installed, and the device is PSSO registered. And company portal autofill is also enabled because a script was deployed from Intune, which we are going to see right now. At this screen, you're seeing that a lot of applications are getting installed. And once the application gets installed, when we go into the settings, over here, we can see that the company portal toggle was turned on, right? And now if you are accessing any website, if you are accessing Outlook, you can see we got the complete SSO behavior. So Company Portal Autofill extension, again, in summary, this is nothing but just a toggle that you need to enable to make sure that you are getting complete SSO experience in the device. However, we are dependent upon the end user to do it. If the end user is not doing it, then even if the device is enrolled and PSSO registered, he might not get complete SSO experience. And Microsoft has a script as well, which you can deploy, and this is automatically going to make sure that all the checks are made, and it is automatically going to enable it. You can deploy the script to a device which is ADE-enrolled, or you can deploy it to a normal device. All right, so before we go to the demo, there are a couple of useful resources that I wanted to call out. Now, there are many third-party blogs which I would suggest you guys referencing. But there are a couple by my very good friend Somesh, who is MVP, and I just wanted to give you guys a sneak peek into the flow overall and few troubleshooting steps and things that you might want to keep in mind. I'll not go into very details of this blog, but just wanted to call it out. So this is the first one which talks about Platform SSO and things that are happening under the hood, as well as things like troubleshooting, configuration, and stuff like that. So if I go into this, it's talking about things that are, I mean, he has broken down the behind the scenes steps, things that are happening at the background, and then the registration that is happening of the device. If I scroll down, there are screenshots on the user experience, which we have already seen, but these are very detailed. So I would highly recommend spending some time in going through this blog, which talks about the various methodologies that are present, the advantages of using PSSO. We have already seen these three methodologies, the settings that you need to configure in the profile. We are anyways going to do this in the demo section, but just wanted to call it out. And then there are videos on how the experience is going to look like as well. Then over here, it's talking about how you can verify that PSSO registration has been done. We have seen this command. It's talking about the output of this command, how to check. I mean, a lot of screenshots are there, how to troubleshoot issues. We have seen this command as well. And then the output of that command and things that we should be checking and stuff like that, right? And there is another blog which talks about PSSO with Setup Assistant, the newer option that we spoke about. This option, the PSSO during device provisioning for AD devices. This blog is pretty much talking about the same and the advantages of it. This was the old flow, what is the new flow, and then there is a video on it as well. And then which options needs to be enabled in the ADE profile that we are seeing over here, and the options. And we need to deploy the company portal app. We have seen all of this. This is just kind of a refresher and in a more detailed format. And then this is the video. We are anyways going to see this later on, but yeah, I mean, as a part of the out of the box provisioning of a macOS device, we see that the device gets PSSO registered and then a local account is created. All of this we have already seen. And then the logs that we should be keeping in mind, how we can verify the commands that we should be running. There is a checklist, troubleshooting, the order in which we should diagnose, and then conclusion. So just wanted to let you guys know that this exists, and there are many other third-party blogs as well. I would highly recommend going through all of that, because we know that in official Microsoft documentation, we might not get a lot of information related to logs, and we might not get a lot of screenshots. And then there is this short URL as well, ak.ms/Intune Platform SSO. This actually redirects to the official Microsoft documentation on Platform SSO, and it talks about all the things in a pretty verbose format. Like it starts with what are the benefits of PSSO, how PSSO works at the background, like the application. I mean, what are the prerequisites over here, the version of macOS, the version of Company Portal, the browsers wherein it's supported, and then the different flavors of PSSO that we have, that is secure enclave smart card password that we have already seen, how to decide which one you want to use, the policy that you need to create, the settings, I mean, each and every attribute that you need to have in that setting, setting policy, settings catalog policy. It's all over here. There are some screenshots as well. And we don't have the user experience, and videos obviously are not there, but this is a good starting place. Okay, that being said, now it's time to get our hands dirty. Now I'm going to switch to my tenant and we are going to see live demo.
I'm at the MacBook right now. This is a brand new device. No setup has been done on this yet. So first let's run this command app SSO, and over here you can see that the device is not currently PSSO registered, and that is because the device is not even enrolled to Intune. I have the company portal package downloaded. Let's try to go through the enrollment flow. So I'll just very quickly go through this. We have all, this is not entirely relevant. We should already know how to enroll a device to Intune. Again, this is one of the ways of enrolling a device to Intune, that is the user downloading the company portal package and installing it manually. You might as well have gone with the ABM flow as well. That doesn't matter. So once the application is installed, now if I go into start, let's do a OK over here. All right, looks good. Now I'm able to see the company portal application. So let's very quickly enroll our device to Intune. Let's quickly install the management profile. All right, so it says that we are all set. Let's just select a device category, done. And then this is the device that we are at. Let's just wait for the compliance and all the compliance to run, configuration policy to come down, and all the apps and everything to come down, even though there is nothing relevant that we have targeted. Let's just give this a couple of seconds, and then we are going to okay, there you go, it's already run. So now let's run the same command again, and over here you can see still there is no policy targeted to this device. Therefore, PSSO registration of this device is not done. So at this point, if I open OneDrive, let us see what the experience is. Over here you can see I have to enter the username. Therefore, the experience is not absolutely seamless. I have to enter the username when I am trying to access OneDrive or any Office resource from the browser in this case being a Safari, and then I have to enter the password as well. I'm not going to enter the password, just so you know that we had to enter the username and password. Now once the device is PSSO registered, we are going to see how this experience actually changes. So from the device end, we are good. The device is enrolled, device is in compliance, the device has checked in, and there is no PSSO registration as seen from the command line. So now let's switch back to the portal, and then let's create a configuration profile. Let's assign it, and then we will come back over here.
All right, so I'm at the Intune portal, and if I very quickly go back to our presentation over here, you can see there were 4 distinct steps. The first 2 steps were kind of optional. Only if you are enrolling your device via ADE flow, then you need to create an ADE profile, and only if you are doing that, you need to deploy a company portal application, otherwise, and deploy it as required. Otherwise, the end user will do the enrollment, go through the OOB phase, and he will enroll the device, and as a part of enrollment, he will install the company portal application. Now, all we need to do is step number 3, and that step number 3 talks about the PSSO configuration that needs to be done, which is nothing but just a settings catalog profile. And in that settings catalog profile, we have to configure all these settings. So if I quickly go back into our documentation, the documentation actually tells us all the settings that needs to be configured in the settings catalog profile. So over here, you can see we need to go to configuration, new policy, under settings catalog. These are the settings that we need to configure with the relevant values. So very quickly, let's do that. So I'm at the Intune portal now. I'm going to go to macOS. Let's very quickly create a new policy, which is a settings catalog kind of a policy. So the first example that we are going to take is the secure enclave implementation. and all the settings reside under authentication and then extensible single sign-on. This is where all the settings reside, and we are going to select everything one by one. If we have a mix of macOS 13 and later, then we have to select we have to configure the authentication methodology in two places. Over here, you can see authentication method deprecated. It is showing deprecated because this is for because for 13 and later, you don't need to configure this. But if you have a mix, then I'll suggest as a best practice, configure it in both the places. So very quickly, let's select all these one by one. Okay, we have selected most of these. I'm just going to close this settings picker. And now if we again go back to the documentation, if you scroll down, it talks about what are the values that needs to be selected. Now, few of them are optional. Like for example, you might have to select under authentication method over here as well as later. You might have to select password or secure enclave or smart card depending upon the flavor that you are wanting to use. However, there are some things that are mandatory and needs to be exactly the same. That is the extension identifier of the company portal application, or the URLs that we have, or the Teams identifier that we have. So those things need to be exactly the same. So we are going to now populate all these settings one by one. And if you want to read more about what this setting is exactly doing, you can just go to this I, and then it will tell you what this is, what is the value that it is expecting, or what this is about. So once done, just we need to click on next. Scope tags is optional. Assignments, we are going to do that later once we create a group and add a user to it. Now, when we click on next, it's going to show us everything that has been configured. So let's just double check and make sure that everything over here is in accordance with the documentation, and then we are good to proceed. So the policy is now created. If I just refresh this, our policy should now be visible, which is the first one. Now, the only thing that I need to do is I need to create a group. So let me just create a group over here. This is going to be a static group wherein I am manually assigning a user to it. All right, so this is the group that got created. It contains the members. And as far as the assignment is concerned, it should contain a user, right? It should be a static group containing user. So let's quickly go back to our configuration profile. And we had not assigned our configuration profile. So let's make sure we are assigning it. This is our configuration profile. We are just going to assign this. And then say, okay, all right, the assignment is done and the device is also enrolled. So I should be able to see this device over here. This is my device. If I click on it and if I go into device configuration, right now that configuration profile has not come down to this device. It will take some time. So maybe let's just wait for it to come down. Let's run a sync of this device from the portal. Now we'll switch back to the device, wait for the PSSO profile to come down to the device, and then we will see what exactly the experience is.
So now we are back at the device, and one thing that we need to keep in mind is for secure enclave flavor of PSSO to work, file vault encryption needs to be turned on in the device. Now we can turn it on by deploying some kind of a policy or a script from the Intune portal, or the end user always has the option of doing it manually. So if I go over here and then type on file vault, over here you can see that I have an option of turning it on. This is a brand new device and there is no data present in the device. Therefore, the encryption is going to be very fast. We'll just, and there you go. The file vault encryption has happened and we are good to go. So Again, just for the sake of it, let me just run this command again. And now over here, you see that the device has received the PSSO policy, but there is nothing under user configuration. So we are going to receive many prompts in this device. I just received one prompt, which I just overlooked. Now, every time you restart the device, that prompt is going to come again and again. So let me just do this. Let me just not take any action, and let me just initiate a restart of this device. So we are at a state wherein, let me just rephrase, the device is enrolled to Intune. The device is targeted via PSSO policy with secure enclave flavor. However, the end user has not gone through the PSSO registration of the device. Okay, that's why we don't see anything under user details when we are running that command. Now all I'm doing is all we have done is we have done the file vault encryption of the device. Think of it like similar to BitLocker encryption. Now let me just show you the behavior when we do a restart of the device. So let me just do a quick restart. All right, so the restart of the device is done. I'm back at the login screen. Now let's just launch the company portal app. Let's just sign into it. Even if you don't do it, the device is going to run a sync, and then we will see the PSSO registration related prompt is going to come up. So we just have to give it a couple of minutes. I am just going to click on check status over here, and I'm also going to run a sync from the Intune portal, and then we will wait for prompts which should come up over here. All right, so there you go. We have just received a notification. If I click on this over here, you can see that this registration is showing up, and it says that registration required, please register with. And this is something that I configured. Again, when we'll go back into the portal, I'll just highlight where is this verbiage, everything about Intune PSSO coming from. This is nothing but when we are creating the settings catalog policy, over there we have an option of determining what is going to be this display name that is going to come up. So we can have the name of our organization or something like that. So I have to click on register over here, and this is wherein the PSSO registration is going to start. So it's very intuitive. We just have to click on continue. First, we have to unlock. It's going to ask us for the credential that is needed for doing the PSSO registration. But this is the last time you have to enter the credential, because after this, for all the subsequent applications and everything, the experience is going to be PSSO personified, right? So let's just wait for this to go through. If there is a MFA, like it was in my case, we'll have to go through the MFA. In my case, there is a authenticator MFA, authenticator configured. I just approved it via authenticator. All right, and over here you see we get this prompt as well, wherein we have to enable the autofill. Now, as I said, the end user has the option of canceling this or clicking on dismiss, for which we have already seen that there is a script that is available. I won't go through all of this right now. For now, let's just assume that I have selected on this autofill. So I'm going to click on open system settings, and then I'm going to enable company portal like a good boy. And then the passkey autofill is enabled for this. I'm just going to click on close, and then I'm going to click on close. So at this point of time, my device, which was Intune enrolled, my device which had file vault encryption already done, and which was targeted via PSSO registration policy, has successfully undergone the PSSO registration. So if I now run the same command over here, now you see that it has received the needed tokens, and now you see that there are a lot more information like we saw as compared to what we saw earlier. We can see the UPN over here under user configuration, like we had already discussed in the theoretical section, right? Like if I go all the way to the top, you can you can see the encryption data over here. You can see the display name, you can see the timestamp, You can see which flavor of PSSO has been utilized. In this case, it is secure enclave. You can see the account name and full name. Both these things are something that we had configured when we were making the profile. So everything looks good over here. All right, so now this brings the obvious question. Why did we do the PSSO registration to begin with, right? So now let's do this. Let's try to see the benefits. So earlier we had seen when we were trying to open OneDrive or any Office 365 resource from the browser, it was asking us for username and password. Now let's see the behavior once the PSSO registration is done. So I enter the username here. The expectation is that now it should no longer ask me for my password, and there you see I get a PSSO based experience. Now let me try to open Outlook in another tab. And I just click on sign in over here. It redirects. It automatically picks the username. I just click on the username, and the expectation is that the mailbox should load, and there you go. I did not have to enter the password. I did not have to go through any MFA, and I got complete single sign-on experience across both the applications while accessed via browser. All right, so the behavior is as expected. Now let's double click on the logs. So we have already seen this log. So there is one more command that we had already seen in the theoretical section that I would want to run. And the command is this. We want to see the logs which are relevant for the com.apple.app SSO. This is the subsystem which is responsible for all platform SSO related functionality happening in the device. So this is the command that we need to run, and it's going to spit out all the output relevant to this subsystem. Now, again, this might not be very clear to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this to a file. So let's export this to SSO logs new.txt. All right, so the export is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fetch that log file, and then we are going to analyze it. So this is the log. I'm going to transfer this to my Windows device, and from there, when we are taking a look over the portal, we will correlate it with the log files that we have got from the device. But at least from the device end, we have everything. We have seen the behavior, we have seen the implementation of PSSO, as well as we have gathered the logs for now, and we are going to see it shortly. Before we switch to the portal, there are a couple of things that we can quickly check. First is, if I go into the device management profile, over here I will be able to see the SSO, extensible SSO, the extension that we spoke about, and this contains all the settings related to PSSO that were deployed from Intune and that were received by the device. So over here you can see this is the extension identifier that we had, the kind of a bundle ID, the URLs that we had over here, which we saw in the profile as well, which we are seeing in the logs as well, the account display name, the token to user mapping, and the methodology or the flavor of PSSO that we have implemented. So all that actually shows up under general, under the where you see the management profile over there itself, you will be able to see it over here. The second is, if we go into the user, so this is the user who has logged in. If I go into that over here, you can see that the registration of the device is done, the methodology is secure enclave, and the tokens are present. This is the second place. And the third is, if you go into the network account server, over here, if I click on edit, over here also we can see that macOS SSO extension is present, and that is the reason why we are getting SSO based experience. So these are a few things that we can check at the device end. We have already covered all of this in the theory section. Now, since we have these logs, let's head to the portal. Let's see how this device shows up at the Intune portal, and then we'll go through these logs. Okay, so we are back at the Intune portal now. Now, very quickly, we are going to take a look over a couple of things. First thing is, let's take a look over the device which was targeted via the PSSO policies. If I go into device configuration, As expected, we can see that our PSSO policy shows has succeeded. If I click on it, I'm expecting only one to show non-applicable, and there you go. The one that under which you remember, right? When we were setting the authentication method to secure enclave, there were two places where we had to set it. One was for 13 and earlier. The other one was for later one. And my macOS device is running with macOS 15. Therefore, the authentication method which is deprecated, this one is not applicable. The rest of them are succeeded, and it looks good. If I go into the Entra portal, over there, if I take a look over the device, I just want to highlight that the device shows up as Entra ID joined. So this is my device. It shows up as Entra ID joined when the device is registered with PSSO. Probably I should have showed you the state of this device before the device was registered with PSSO, but it was enrolled to Intune. Probably I'll do it in the next demo. But this is what a working state device looks like at the Entra portal. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show from the Entra portal. Now I want to very quickly take a look over the logs. So this is the log that we exported. Now if we go into the deck, this is the command that we ran, and this is the subsystem that we targeted, and the com.apple.appsso. And if you use this event message contains begin device registration, then you'll be able to filter with the relevant messages. And I exported it to a text file. Now we are going to go through it, and if you guys remember, in the theory section we saw that this is what we were expecting to see: error codes like 1004 before the device was PSSO registered, and after it was PSSO registered we can see the authentication method, which is secure enclave, and we can see the URLs as well. We can see the bundle ID of the company portal application as well. Earlier there was, you would see something like no app SSO URL, but later on you will be able to see all the app SSO URL. And earlier you couldn't see any SSO tokens, but later on you would be able to see like finished setting up session for this person, stuff like that, right? So these are things that we are expecting to see in the logs as far as working log is concerned, in case of a device registered with PSSO. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just make it quicker, and I want to search with the event ID 1004. And if I do a Control F over here, you can see that no device configuration data to load. Now you will see that this error will come up a lot of time in the logs until and unless the PSSO profile comes down. So you will see that this is there multiple times, which to us is suggesting that at this point of time the PSSO profile was not down at the device and the device was not registered with PSSO. Now after it came down, what we can do is we can just do a Control F with the flavor of PSSO that we have deployed. In our case it was secure enclave. So if I just do a Control F with that, over here you see this is a very important information, and this is the timestamp, 6:30 around 6:30ish PM, and over here you see this contains all the attributes related to the PSSO profile that was deployed from the Intune portal, right? So if I take a very quick look at it, over here you can see the bundle identifier, which is the company portal bundle identifier, and then account display name. This is something that we mentioned at the Intune portal, if you guys remember, in the policy. Over here you see the account display name, everything about Intune PSSO. This is what is showing up over here under account display name. Authentication method is secure enclave. Enable authorization is one which we have enabled. Enable user at login, this is also something that we have enabled. So every token to user mapping, account name, everything that we have enabled. Use shared device key, screen lock behavior, team identifier is this value. So you can see everything that we had enabled in our policy, all of that is showing up over here in accordance. So this is what we can check in case of if we have to do any troubleshooting and stuff like that, right? So this is one way of double checking and ensuring that the device has received the right policy with the right settings. Now initially you would see something like no app SSO URL. So let me just Control F with that as well and show you guys that. So if I do a control F with no app SSO URL, these are the things that I see, and you will again see a lot of these. This is again when the device was not registered. This is, you see, at an earlier time, this is at 6 p.m. but we saw that the device had received the profile at around 6:31. So over here you see that there are many logs which says that no app SSO URL, which kind of makes sense to me. We can control F and go through all the 3 or 4 URLs that we had configured. Like over here you see there are these URLs, right, which have now started showing up in the logs as well. And we had configured these URLs in the policy as well, right? And these URLs are prefixes of the identity providers, which in our case is Entra, where the app extension, which in our case is Company Portal, performs the SSO. And lastly, if I just control F with this verbiage, that is finished setting up a new session for extension and whatever our SSO extension is. If I do just control F, you will be able to see messages related to that as well, which says that finished setting up new session for the extension, and then you can see the bundle ID over here as well as some path. So these are 2 important logs that I would like you to keep in mind while we are troubleshooting any PSSO related issues. The 2 important logs were, first, the macOS system logs for which we are running this command, and the one before that, this is something that we've already seen, and that is when we were running this command, the app SSO platform -s command. We have already seen this output where before and after the device received the PSSO profile and it underwent the registration.
All right, folks. So the next thing we are going to see is the password flavor of PSSO implementation. So I've already made the policy. Let's very quickly go through it. Now, most of the settings are going to remain the same as what we have seen earlier, except here under the authentication method, instead of secure enclave, we are going to see select password. The account display name, we already know this. It comes up in the notification on the right hand side. The authentication method over here again is going to be password. This one is the older method for 13 and earlier. This is for 13 and later. Now enable authorization is enabled, enable create user as login is enabled. Under file vault policy, we have added this. New user authentication mode set to standard. And these settings were same as earlier. The account name and the full name, shared device keys is enabled, and then registration token, screen lock behavior, team identifier, type is going to be redirect, and then the URLs. So the policy is pretty much the same. Let's very quickly assign it. All right, so it's assigned. Now we are good to go. So now very quickly, let's switch to the device. Now there is one very important thing that I would highlight when we are looking at the device experience, and that is after the device is PSSO registered with the password option, we will see that the password used to log into the device is changing, and now the newer password to log into the device is the password of the account that was used to do the PSSO registration, meaning it's no longer the local password, it is a cloud password. So let's quickly switch to the device and then see the implementation of this flavor of PSSO in the device.
Alright guys, so you can see I'm at the device right now. I'm going to log into it, and the reason I am taking the video from my phone is I want to prove to you guys the password that I'm actually entering while logging in. So there's a local account named Shirsha, and it has a password. The password is Microsoft@123. So let me just show it to you guys, entering it. And enter. This step was important just to prove to you guys the password that I'm entering right now. So now we are going to switch into the device and then do a PSSO registration of this device using the password flavor, and then I will sign in again and show to you guys that the password of the local account indeed changed. Alright, so we are inside the device now, just running a sync from here, waiting for the PSSO policy to come down, and once it does, we are going to go through the PSSO registration and then see the experience. And there you go, we have received the notification which says that use your whatever display name we had. Going to click on register. We have already seen this experience. pretty much it remains the same. Over here I'm entering the local password, that is Microsoft @123, and then unlock this. Let's enter the password here. So over here we need to enter the password again. And this password, which is not Microsoft @123, is now going to be set as the local password of the device, of the local account. So I just click on close, all set. Now what I'm going to do is, let's just do a refresh. Let's see. Let's do a check status again. Okay, it's going to check status again. Then the PSSO registration should be successful. Then I'm going to restart the device, and then I'm going to show you guys that when I log in with Microsoft @123, that password no longer works. Now I have to use the password of the cloud account which I had used to register the device. And over here on the right hand side, you also see it says that your password has been synchronized with this account, which means that now the local password has been changed. So let's just do a quick restart, and then let's see which password works while logging into the device. Alright guys, so the device has restarted. You can see this is the device, it has got synced as well. So now I'm going to log into the device, and when I enter the old password, which was Microsoft, you see when I press enter, this password no longer works, because now the password of this local account is changed, which is, now when I enter the cloud account's password, now I am inside the device. The device, if I try to open OneDrive, now the experience is similar. You just have to enter the username. We are going to get single sign-on experience. We no longer have to enter the password. So the experience inside is now similar to the experience that we would have seen, irrespective of whether it was secure enclave methodology or whether it was password methodology. All right, so we were at the device. We were able to log into the device. Now if I go into the device configuration, over here you can see that the password policy had successfully come down, and obviously the deprecated authentication method had was not applicable. Other than that, everything else was applicable. So the intention of this exercise was understanding the difference between secure enclave and password based flavor of PSSO implementation. In case of password based implementation, as over here it says, it does exactly what it is intended to do. It synchronizes the local account's password with the cloud IDP, right? That is what is happening over here. The local password set on the device, that changes, okay, which is very important, because the user should be made aware, right, of what flavor of PSSO you are implementing and what is changing for the end user. Over here, the cloud password becomes the new password of the local device. However, in this case, in case of secure enclave, the local password does not change. The local password remains as the password it was before. However, this is more secured because, as we have seen, you are utilizing the secure enclave methodology, a hardware which is present in the device.
All right, so there are two more things that I wanted to show you guys, but I think I will bring it down to only one, because in the interest of time, the video is getting too long. One was, if you're not doing a PSSO deployment using Setup Assistant, that is, your devices are not brand new, then we have seen that the end users can just ignore the prompts, right? So in that case, the remedy was, there is this PSSO registration pop-up window script that is available in GitHub. You can make use of that, and that is going to bring a script. I mean, it's going to bring a dialog box like this, and the end user will not have the option of skipping it. Now, the other thing was, since we have seen, we need to enable the autofill for Company Portal after the PSSO registration is done. So we have seen this document earlier. Let me just bring it up again. This is a very recent documentation which says that why you need to enable the autofill and why it's dependent on the end user and stuff like that. So this is what we are going to repro. So we are going to assume that the end user does the PSSO registration via via the secure enclave flavor. However, he does not manually switch on the toggle And when he doesn't do that, then we are going to deploy a script to take care of it. So the first steps are going to be the same. First, we have to make sure that the PSSO policy is correctly deployed. So this is the secure enclave flavor. I'm just making double checking and making sure that it is assigned to the group which contains my user, and there is no other policy that is applied to the user right now. So now I'm going to go to the end device, reset it, do the PSSO registration. However, when I come to this screen, I am not going to enable this toggle, and we are then going to come back to the Intune portal, deploy the script in order to do it.
All right, so back at the device, enrolling it again, I had done a factory reset of it. So just the moment it is enrolled, it should get the new PSSO policy with secure enclave flavor down to it. And then we will not enable the autofill feature. And over here you can see, since the PSSO policy was already deployed to the device, when the device was undergoing enrollment over here itself, in the company portal app itself, you see this disclaimer, as well as you have an option of registering the device, which is what we are going to do. I'm going to very quickly go through this because we have already done this once. And there you go. It wants us to go to the open system. It wants us to do the open system settings and toggle the autofill option for company portal, which is, it wants me to go over here and toggle this. I am not going to do that. So we are emulating a scene wherein the end user goes through the PSSO registration of the device when secure enclave is there in the picture. However, he does not do the toggle. Therefore, he is not going to get the complete PSSO experience in all the browsers and all the application. So I'm just going to close it. As you can see, this was all optional for the end user. And now if I go over here and do search for autofill over here, you can see it is still not turned on. Now let's go back to the Intune portal, and from there we are going to target the script and then come over here and see what the experience is. All right, so I'm back at my device, and over here you can see this is the block that we have seen earlier as well, which talks about how we can automatically enable autofill after the PSSO registration is done, why this is needed. We know that the end user might not click on that toggle, stuff like that. Which we have already seen. So all we are going to do is we are going to deploy a script. This is the script that we have to deploy. It's there in this GitHub repository. So when I click on it, it takes me to that GitHub repository. If you click on this, you have an option of downloading this. So we have downloaded this. Now all we have to do is we have to deploy it from Intune. Now all you have to do is click on add, name this whatever you would like, click on next, and this is where we are uploading that file. So I upload the file over here, and then the script shows up over here. We just need to make sure that we are not running the script as assigned in users. So set this to no. You can hide the notification if you want. Script frequency, anyways, we would just want it to run once. And the maximum number of retry times, maybe you can set this to 3. And then, yeah, pretty much straightforward, just next and finish, right? So I've already made this deployment. All we need to do is assign it to a device, and which I have already done the assignment. Now, all this is doing is this is removing the overhead from the end user to click on that toggle. And if the end user has not clicked on that toggle, and which would mean that he is not going to get complete PSSO experience across all apps and browsers, this script is going to fix that, and it is going to enable it. All right, so I ran the sync a couple of times now, which ran successfully. So now if I go back to scripts, and if I look at the status of the script, this shows as it was successfully deployed. And there is nothing much that I'm expecting to see in the result. I mean, apart from what I had mentioned in the logs. So over here you can see that from the top, if you start seeing, it says that starting the SSO check, and then it says running with the user ID, and then checking SSO registration, and then checking whether autofill is enabled or not, and then enabling autofill, and then the last line which says that autofill from the company portal is now enabled. So everything looks good from the portal end. Now let's quickly switch to the device and then see. Because we know that we did not get any prompts in the device. Now let's go to the device and see if the autofill has actually gotten enabled or not. Alright, so back at the device, and now if I go into the settings tab, and over here, if I search with autofill and password,
Then over here you see Company Portal passkey autofill option for Company Portal is automatically enabled. Now again, we did not enable it manually when we were doing the PSSO registration. This was done by the script. Again, a nifty little trick for us to know. And if you're doing secure enclave implementation, I would highly recommend deploying this, because if the end user has already enabled it, that is absolutely fine. The script just checks it. If the end user has not enabled it, then the script is going to seamlessly take care of it. Just like silent BitLocker encryption that we do at the backend, right? No dependency on the end user.
So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope in this session we were able to understand the history and the need of PSSO, the background of what existed before PSSO and how did PSSO arrive into the scene, the working of PSSO, the things that are working at the background, how we can deploy the different flavors of PSSO, the logs that we can take a look at, the flow that is visible to the end user, the new enhancements that has been recently made to PSSO, especially during ADE enrollment with Setup Assistant, the scripts that we can deploy, especially to enable autofill or to ensure that the pop-up screen is coming and the end user is not able to bypass it, some future improvements, and I hope that the demo was helpful where we were able to set up everything from scratch and make use of it. So I hope this has been informative for you. I would like to thank you for viewing. This is your friend Saurabh Sarkar signing off.